Hello, everybody, and welcome again to a very special discussion. And I am once again joined by my good friend Ian. Hey, Ian, how you doing?
Hey man, dude, it's great to be back doing this. I didn't think we'd be doing this so soon.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you again. So, just for the people who missed our last super big video, how about you introduce yourself with all your stuff and all your links and whatnot, so everyone knows who they're dealing with.
Right, of course. Need to know my power level.
Exactly.
So my name is IanWaffles. I have a YouTube channel where I mostly talk about anime-related stuff. I have, in terms of how it would connect to this video, I have two videos about My Hero Academia, one on Overhaul and one on Eri, just kind of going into their characters. Love MHA, and I always love discussing it with Oceaniz over on Twitter. And one time we were just, so every week we would just discuss the war arc, and we decided, hey, let's actually get together and talk about it, which was the previous video. And so now we've come to a point where we were thinking, hey, maybe we could do this for not only the upcoming arcs that are being covered in the anime, but maybe we could go back through the manga and kind of give ourselves an excuse to reread the series that we all, or both of us, just really love and really want to re-experience for fun. And make some content for you guys, of course, for Ocean's fans. So, and then that's my YouTube channel. And so, actually, did you want to introduce that idea or of doing this more?
This is fine. we can leave this in. Yeah. So just like for the complete explanation, this video will be on the joint training arc because that is the one that is currently probably going to be the most hotly discussed one, thanks to the anime. But we will eventually get to all the arcs. At least that's the plan.
Yeah, that's the plan. It's up to you guys if you enjoy it. And the response from last video was so heartwarming. It was really nice to see all the kind comments and see how much people really enjoyed listening to us talk about a series we love for 4 hours. So
Yeah.
so that was great. And so that actually perfectly segues into my one other point, is that if you do like this kind of content and you like listening to me and just people like me who really love MHA and just go into all these details about it, like Oceans and I have another channel that I am a frequenter on, not so much recently, but it's called the Church of MHA by Aniki Smash. He does videos every week on every MHA chapter on Sundays, and they usually come out around the time the chapter even comes out. He does a live reaction like as soon as it comes out, and those discussions go on for no less than 2 hours. So if you really love this type of content and you want it consistently, like weekly and stuff like that, definitely check out his channel. Those guys would love to have you and have more listeners. So definitely check that out if that's something you're interested in.
Right, yeah. So if you are in for more long-form MHA content, that is another source for that. But today, we are here with the topic at hand being perhaps the most controversial My Hero Academia arc. Would you agree with that? The most controversial arc in My Hero Academia?
Oh yeah, definitely. While the war arc has been getting some controversy, and of course Overhaul had controversy or Culture Festival, you know, the series has gone downhill many times, as the fan base will let you know. But this was the one. This was the arc that whenever it was coming out, people were like, "What is going on with MHA? Like, where are we going?" So yeah, I would totally agree.
Yeah, because like, before we get into any of the main topics, God, reading this shit as it was coming out, and we're gonna say this a lot at the time, but reading it while it was coming out was maybe the most miserable experience I've had as an MHA fan. Just not necessarily because of the content, we'll get to that, but just because of every week you just log on to your various social media and everyone was just shitting on MHA like, every single week. It was very exhausting.
It was exhausting, and then you yourself felt like, why are these, there are chapters, multiple chapters, that were just 13 pages long, and of course these are action chapters, so you read it like that, and you're just like, is that it? Oh my gosh. And then the Horikoshi went on a ton of breaks. There was just, and of course where the arc was placed, it just felt like, what is my hero doing? Why are we here?
Exactly.
And this was the second longest arc at the time, right?
Yes, I believe so. It is.
Oh my gosh.
It is actually, like, I don't know the chapter number, but I know it's about 2.5 volumes long, which is, not much shorter than Overhaul. But you mentioned placement, and that is actually the first topic we should get into, because that is, of course, going to influence almost everything else that we're gonna say, isn't it?
Yes, of course, the placement of this arc. So do you want to introduce this idea or me?
You can introduce it. Go on.
Okay. So with the placement of this arc, the thing with MHA that it's in the title, My Hero Academia. However, at the point we were at in this part of the stretch of the series, we had kind of seen almost everything that you would want in your initial setup. Early on in a series, you're allowed to kind of take it more easy, or maybe dive into more of the simpler aspects of what your premise allows for, because your audience doesn't know what to get attached to, and so these these arcs that are just more like the sports festival or the battle trial or, doing the little tests or things like that, or like the final exams. Your audience is more willing to come along with you for these ideas because we kind of want to know, what's a hero school like? What's Deku gonna do in these different circumstances? What's this Birdman about? What are all these cool characters about? But at the point we were at in My Hero, we have had the Culture Festival, which was also a very school-based arc, and it was even more detached from the hero side of it. So people were kind of already done with the school aspect, and we'd had arcs like Overhaul, Camino, and at the time, Pro Hero, which was going into all this crazy stuff of the League of Villains, these Nomu, what's going on with Endeavor, the Hero Commission, what's this character Hawks, what he's gonna do. And the arc was titled the Pro Hero Arc. They made a big to-do about it. So you're like, oh, we're gonna go into the pros, we're gonna learn about the top 10. And kid you not, you can go back and check this, at the last chapter of the Pro Hero Arc, which was a nice 10 chapters, which at the time we were kind of past doing really, really short arcs, like the initial start of the series. So in that chapter, we have Endeavor say, I shouldn't have said that to Natsuo. I need to be a better dad. On the same page, smash cut to, so I was at gym today, and it's and it's just Deku going back to class, or going back to his room, and then he falls asleep, and we're in the Vestige world. And the jarring nature of that was one thing, but it's like, okay, cool, it's the Vestige stuff, got it. And then we go into a school arc, and there's no big, character thing we're going to deal with. The only thing that, if you're just like a casual reader, that you have to tie yourself over for this arc is what's going on with the Vestiges, and are we even going to learn anything? There was not even a promise that we would. And if you did think narratively it would make sense to learn these things, Horikoshi hides it at the end of the arc for the Shinso fight with Deku. So until then, you are stuck with 20 chapters of fights between characters you might not care about if you're not as big into MHA. And that's where this arc's placement really cripples it, because it's smashed right after something so important, something everyone would be invested in, and then we just go back to school. And not even like school as in like all these different character motivations, it's just, this is the most, I would say, low-stakes arc in My Hero, right next to the remedial course. Even Culture Festival had bigger stakes than this arc. Would you agree?
Yes, I would definitely agree. And you mentioned the way it's structured with the Vestige world, and before I get into any of that, I guess I want to quickly propose my bottom line so that anyone who only has 10 minutes to get into this video, my bottom line is, this would be a great arc if it were literally anywhere else in the manga. And I think a big problem is, you mentioned the smash cut. I think it's that, and I think it's also the goal structure of the arc that really cripples it in tandem with the placement. Now, you sort of brushed up on it, but one thing I've always thought about this arc, and that has kind of solidified itself with this reread and with thinking about it more, is that in like shonen manga, you often get a 3-tier goal structure. You have short-term goals, you have mid-term goals, and you have long-term goals. And your short-term goals are like, oh, I wonder what this character is going to do on the next page, on the next chapter. Like, I wonder how they're going to punch each other next, right? And then you have the mid-tier or mid-term goals, which are like, okay, what's going to happen at like the big climaxes of this arc? What are going to be like its big central points? And then you have the long-term goals, which are what are going to be the long-term consequences of this arc for the rest of the story, right? And I think every single arc in MHA, aside from Culture Festival, Joint Training, wrong arc, does a great job at establishing these 3 levels of importance. If we compare it, for example, to the War arc, the short-term goals are, holy shit, what is going to happen like immediately next? Are we going to see, Deku fight Shigaraki in the next chapter, or is it going to be the Dabi reveal? Like, these short-term goals were clearly set from the beginning. And then you have the midterm goals, which are, you enter the war arc, it's going to be like an all-out battle, probably. And so in your head, you're like, okay, what is going to be the big thing with this arc? Is it going to be something with Dabi? Is Shigaraki going to get a power-up? Are we going to see all these pro-hero people fight and go out in a blaze of glory? Like, there you have a pretty clear midterm goal. And the long-term goal for the war arc was pretty clear, because, like, it could not end without consequences, right? Like, either the heroes win and we need to get a new cast of villains, or the villains win and, shit happens. The joint training arc is really weird in that it seemingly doesn't care about establishing any of this. Short term, it's like, okay, you're gonna see a bunch of cool people fight. That's cool. It's like, yeah, in the short term, but as you said, this is 20 chapters long, so what is the midterm goal? Well, like, Shinso's back. You want to see what he does, right? It's like, kinda, but again, not enough to carry me for 20 chapters. And then the long-term goal is the established long-term goal is, we'll see how much the students have improved, maybe, and also Deku might have something going on with One for All.
Yeah,
and
something going on. That's the most you can define it. Like, you
Exactly.
you could not even predict like, oh, he's gonna unlock a quirk, or something like that. You're just like, something's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the setup just does not lend itself to, like, feeling out where this is headed. And for certain stories that can work, but for something like My Hero Academia, which is fundamentally a straightforward battle shonen, it presents a feeling of, okay, have we lost our direction? Like, where is this going? And to tie it back to the name of this segment, placement, this is especially bad when you're sandwiched between two of the most, like, high-stakes, structurally important arcs the series had seen in a long time. Like, Pro Hero shows you the, importance and consequences of All Might's loss and how that has affected everyone else, including Endeavor, who steps up and kind of becomes a second focal character, not necessarily a second protagonist, but like a second character through which we experience the story.
He's the third perspective next to Shigaraki and Deku.
Exactly, right? And then you have MVA, which is, again, one of those arcs where from the moment it started, you knew it was going to have some serious consequences. And it did. Like, by the time they reached Deika, it could only end in two ways. Either Redestro wins and oops, new villain cast, or Shigaraki wins and oops, Shigaraki's the king of villains. So being sandwiched between those arcs, and add to that the extremely abrupt switch from Pro Hero, and you just have something that is jarring and difficult to sell. Like, in the context of the structure of MHA, this is the most out of place arc by far. Like, I shit a lot on summer exams, and once we get to that, you will hear my rants about that arc, because spoilers, I do think that is the actual worst arc of MHA. But even that arc fits better in its placement than joint training. Like,
it acts as a good breather, calm down from Stain, and it kind of ties into my idea of earlier words, like that was so early on in the series that the audience is still pretty much okay with doing school stuff and kind of coming down,
Yeah, exactly. Like, for perspective, the chapter in which they announce that Bakugo and Deku are going to be fighting is the same chapter whose color page announced the anime adaptation. So, that was very early.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, like, I can't get away. I can't get over that cut from Pro Hero to joint training, because it's so abrupt. Like, I tried rereading only joint training for this video, and, even then, because you open your volume, and on the same page, you still have Endeavor saying, oh, my interesting family drama, I wonder where this is going.
Smash cut to Jim.
Meanwhile, at UA, Mineta is talking about who he's gonna jerk off tonight, and Deku's like, I'm gonna go to
Deku's sweaty.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, it's bizarre. Like, I genuinely can't figure out what Hori was like trying to do here. But honestly, I am willing to present the possibility that this was a concession due to overwork. Because of course, that is the context within which we have to also see this arc is this is an arc that Hori wrote maybe at his most overworked. We know that now in hindsight. He was working on concepts for the movies. He was working on establishing more spin-off contracts. He was sick and he was moving.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I'm really glad you brought up the context thing. Actually, do you have anything else to finish that point before I kind of jump off and go on my little tangent?
No, I was just gonna say, like, all of that stuff becomes more excusable once you know that Hori was kind of going through it at the time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and it's always good to consider. Like, sure, we can sit on our ivory towers and be like, how could you screw this up? Or this doesn't feel right at all. But it's like 1,000,001 decisions have to be made along with real life for the fact that any media is good is a miracle in itself. And I feel like especially in manga when it's even more centralized on a few general people. So, it's good to give some grace. Yeah.
yeah, of course. But you were gonna fly into something?
Yeah, of course. So that I'm glad you brought up the context thing because I wanted to put because you said everything negative about the arc that makes sense in the structure. And I wanted to say something about the placement, I mean. And I wanted to say something good about the placement that I really like in hindsight, which is that I was trying to think, where could this arc have fit early on in the series? And again, this is with 2020 hindsight. So I was like, well, maybe where you could fit it how about this be the final exam arc? And then you just kind of mesh in Deku and Bakugo working together. Because think about it, this arc really doesn't need to exist for the plot stuff that happens with Shinso and Deku, because otherwise it is all solely character stuff, which I appreciate. But you could have easily had the vestiges happen. They think about Shinso and they're like, hey, what if that works? And then you just go to Shinso and have him brainwash Deku, and then you do it, right? That's how that's like plot relevant stuff. It didn't have to be at a training arc. So I was thinking, what if you place this in the final exam or in that location? One, people would be more likely to enjoy it. But here's what I think actually makes this arc really well in its placement, is that if you had it at that point, everyone remembers the Chunin exams from Naruto and how at that point it sets up Naruto and a lot of the fan base to think that all these characters are going to be relevant going forward, and then it leaves a lot of people are still salty today that like certain characters, they just get shafted, right? And then it just becomes the whatever show. Obviously different series, so I'm not going to say whether that was good or bad on Kishimoto's part, but I actually think it really felt like this is a love letter to the My Hero fans. And the reason I say that is because you made a great video about the side cast in MHA and how you don't need all 20 of Class 1A to be Todoroki levels of side character importance. Some of them are just going to be gags, or some of them are just going to be there to fill out the roster. But even more so, Class B? Like, did you ever even expect that, besides maybe Kendo, Tetsu, and Monoma, and even them, did you ever expect we would get really any time with the rest of Class B? Or did you even think it was necessary, Yeah,
not at all, obviously.
Not at all. But people love the My Hero Academia cast because their designs, their quirks, and the concept of superpowers is so engaging. So when I look at this arc, it really feels like Horikoshi was like, you know what? People love Shinso, people love the Class B characters, even though I've not done anything with them, and people love Class 1A, and they just haven't done much either. Like, it's like, we remember that Todoroki and Bakugo have kind of been sidelined this whole time because of Overhaul Arc and Culture Festival and stuff like that, and they haven't got fights also recently. So it really felt like Horikoshi, regardless of the fact that it didn't work out in the long run placement-wise, I really can see the heart behind it, in that he was just like, okay, you guys always bring up the fact that I skip fights in the school test, unless it's the anime. They go through all of them. But in license exam, we skip Momos section. In the test, we skip a ton of kids. You know what? We are going to sit down, and we are just going to enjoy these characters and being around them and just characterizing them. And that's it. That's the arc. And the only thing else we're going to do is Deku plot stuff. And you just get to have Hero School. This is the most Hero School arc this is. And I really appreciate that and the heart behind it. And how this ties back to the Chunin exam thing is that if this was earlier, then I think you would have that feeling in the audience where it's like, man, remember when like Tetsu Tetsu used to be relevant, or remember when the pony girl used to be relevant, or the mushroom girl, or the guy with the black quirk, all these cool characters. Oh, but Horikoshi just wasted them. He doesn't even go to them anymore. But because this is happening now and in such a weird spot, it really shows the heart of the series that no, it wants to give time to these characters, and it does care about them. And you know what? If you want that time, even though it doesn't really help the series in the long run, I'm going to give it to you. Here's this arc. And from that perspective, every time I go back to this arc, I like it more. Just because I can tell that this arc is not cynical in any fashion. At least to me.
Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely think you've got a good claim there. And actually, we can use this to segue over to our next part, which is the appeal of the arc. Because while the placement is generally unanimously agreed upon to be bad,
yes. Yes.
There are things that this arc does well and things that create a sort of appeal. And you touched upon how it is a love letter to fans. And having reread it, oh my god, Hori is an absolute master at character design and character concepting. Every single character from Class A and Class B, aside from the ones that are supposed to be stupid on purpose, could be a main character off of design and quirk alone. Like, going through these fights, I realized, holy shit, I would actually dig a series on any of these guys based solely on their power and on their design. Like, the fucking Blade Lizard guy, whose name I don't remember, who, like, you know, can create blades from his body has... Yeah, like, I would read a series about him. Like, obviously he has no character right now, but if you gave him an actual series, I would read him because his design is awesome and his quirk is cool. Or, like, oh, what's his... I can't remember. His first name is Ken. The guy who can rotate any part of his body.
Yeah, the spiral guy who fights Ojiro.
Yeah, that guy is awesome. I love him so much. Like, his quirk is insanely cool, and his attitude is kind of a mix between Bakugo and Todoroki. Like,
yeah, they all have such big personalities that, like you said, you could instantly kind of get to like figuring them out and being like, okay, if I were to write something about this character, I could take this, this, and this. Sorry, you can continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you say is absolutely true. Like, the fanfic community has been doing that, right?
Right.
But that's kind of what struck me the most about this reread, and I think that is where the appeal of this arc comes from. It's, as you said, delivering on some of the design promises that Hori made during the sports festival where introduced most of these goobers. And man, I was entertained. Like, now that now that it's 2021 and I know what happens after this arc and I don't have to read, one attack per week.
Right.
All of this stuff is actually really entertaining. These characters are fun to experience. Like, I love how much like multifacetedness Hori crams into them, despite them literally just being fluff at the end of the day, right? Like, they're set dressing. You don't need to give fucking manga Fukidashi a tragic backstory, right? But there is so much fun stuff about them. Like, I tweeted about it yesterday. The fact that Juzo is bilingual for some reason made me so excited. Just because it was like an additional bit of characterization, right? And,
and the fact that he's like friends with Pony and he speaks to her in English, like he wants to communicate with her, and he's like such a nice guy, and he just walks around being like, "Don't you dare hurt our good friend Tetsu Tetsu." And then later he comes in and he's like, "You leave Pony alone. We're actually very good friends." Like, he's just a nice guy. And then there's this really cute panel where Tetsu Tetsu's like, "Good job, Honanuki," because he softened the ice from Todoroki's attack, and he just gives a thumbs up, and and his like his shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so much fun little stuff crammed into these characters. And I really think that again, is a very efficient way of doing it. Because giving all of these characters the fucking, oh, my family was murdered by my brother backstory would be completely inefficient and wasteful. Because you just cannot support a narrative like that, right?
And when would we get back to it that it would be relevant to keep?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I really struggle to empathize when people say that, oh, My Hero's cast is boring and bloated. It's like, it is bloated. There's a lot of them, but like,
I think it is a lie to say that it does not develop or characterize its sidecast. That's just wrong at this point. Especially when you have an arc like this that I counted. I went back and checked. I went through every character who it seemed like Horikoshi wanted me to remember. And obviously he wants you to remember all of them. Like the Spiral guy is not on this list, but the way I sectioned this was based on, do these characters like make decisions and make choices that affect the battle? Like Horikoshi, like for example, Pony. Pony makes the decision to keep Shoto in the air and not fight back. She makes the decision to do all these things. Whereas I wouldn't have had her if it was just simply she aided Tetsu in beating the crap out of Todoroki, which we'll get to. So I checked, and there are 22 characters in this whole section that Horikoshi really wants you to like pay attention to and try to find some love for. And 12 of those characters are Class B characters, which is more than half of them. You know?
Yeah. It's insane. Like, looking back on it now, I really do appreciate that we got an arc like this. Like, because it's just not something any of us expected, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And getting this substance on these, like, B-list characters was endearing. Like, rereading this, I am really into, like, Honenuki and Kuroiro and Kinoko. I like them. They're super cool characters that don't need, like, an enormous amount of depth. They're just fun to watch. And this is supported by each of them having really cool quirks. Like, I was surprised at, like, rereading it that I'd forgotten a lot of these quirks, but now that I've reread them, I can't name you a single boring one. Like, they're all interesting. Like, one guy, like, one Class B guy who I will never get any extra info on, but who I absolutely love, is Negi Shota. The guy with the twin impact quirk.
Yes.
The little round guy.
Please ignore everything Monoma says. That guy.
Yes. He is awesome though, because I saw him like when he was introduced in Sports Festival. I was like, okay, that is the chubby character. They're gonna make fun of him because that's what they do.
Yeah.
But he has like a fucking muscle suit, and he throws hands this entire arc.
He's a Saiyan. He has a scouter. Yeah. And a Dragon Ball detector on his wrist.
Yes. And his like, there's like the panel where they say it's turned into an all-out brawl, and like most panels of Shota is just him winding up a massive haymaker, and I love that. Like, it's so non-standard for like a character of like his body proportion, and I just really appreciate that. And his quirk is great. Like, twin impact is so cool, and especially the way Monoma uses it to fuck with Deku at the end of the battle is so fun, where he's like, oh, I suppose if I said fire, that would be bad, wouldn't it? And it's just fucking
Deku gets bitch slapped. Because it wasn't gonna knock him out. Like, Deku didn't even feel it when he first got hit by it. But it's just so funny that Monoma in his dying breath gets to give Deku a bitch slap and give him a bloody nose.
Yeah, it's crazy. But here's the thing, and here's, I think, where I have to kind of circle back to some of the gripes we have. When I was reading this, I realized I did not remember half of this. Like, this twin impact thing that Monoma does, I had no recollection of it. I had barely any recollection of, like, how the fights actually played out. And, man, like, once I realized that, I realized how detrimental the weekly experience was.
Ugh.
Because that weekly read was terrible. Like, we would get one attack per week, right? Like, one chess move per week. And it just killed your attention span. And rereading it now...
Especially when you didn't know where the arc was going, too.
Exactly. And, like, rereading it now and, like, absorbing it all really solidified just how much stuff I had missed the first time, just out of sheer, like, exhaustion with the series at that point. Like, and it's... Because I've been thinking about that ever since I started reading it. It's like, it's so bizarre, because this is an arc that is mostly defined by its weekly experience, but the weekly experience is a transient one. No one can ever read this weekly again, unless you force yourself to, in which case you can still always choose not to once you get annoyed.
And you also don't have the breaks.
Exactly. And, you know, the weekly read is gone. It will never happen again, and yet it is the way in which it is defined in the heads of many who read it weekly. Whereas, the volume version is both immensely more enjoyable and the one way to read it that will persist. So I guess it really goes to show how much that first impression, that current experience really influences how people see an arc. Because, like, there's no real reason to judge this arc by its weekly experience, a year and a half after that experience ended. Like, that experience existed for a summer, whereas the volume experience will exist for as long as books exist, right?
Yes, right.
And yet, we are still talking about the weekly experience, and I think that's, as I said, bizarre. It's weird. It's weird that it's so salient, despite being so transient. And to anyone who had trouble with this arc while reading it weekly, or even dropped the series, I highly encourage you, just binge through it now. Like, it is infinitely more enjoyable. Like, even if you don't know where the arc goes, in which case, what are you doing here? But even if you don't know that, it is still, I'm sure it's still more enjoyable than that dreadful weekly Thrudge. And yeah, like, I suppose that is, like, the best way I can sum it up. It's defined by an experience that is gone, because that experience was truly, like, discouraging to anyone who was trying to have fun with the series.
Chapter 200 is literally 10 pages.
How many pages?
10 plus
plus
a cover page, which doesn't count. It is 10 pages.
That's Momo, right? That's her.
That
Yeah,
was chapter 200. There was and most of the arc is 13 pages.
Yeah, funnily enough, it's funny that you mentioned the Momo chapter, because that is actually pretty much the exact time I remember during the weekly read where I lost interest, where I was like, man, this really isn't going anywhere, is it?
We have 3 more rounds? Oh, God.
Yeah, I suppose that's also the thing, because this is obviously the first time, you mentioned it, this is the first time Hori really committed himself to showing each fight in detail.
Yeah.
And it just so coincided with an arc that had a horrible release schedule. And once both of those things had become apparent, most people bailed. Like, most people just fucking dipped. And yeah, it's so interesting that is this arc's legacy.
But the anime.
Yeah? What?
But the anime is coming out, and I believe because the chapters are so short, you could probably do most of the fights. I think every one of the fights besides the last one could be done in at least an episode. And the Bakugo fight, that's a complete curb stomp. That's half an episode.
Yeah, I would say that.
I think this arc, if Bones decides to give it the treatment that the trailers promise. I know obviously trailers can be misleading. We thought similar things with season 4, blah blah blah. But with this season, the certain ways they're adding like boom to the explosions of Bakugo, or putting the bzzz whenever Kaminari electrocutes the Wolfman or the Beast guy, or the fact that they're using 3D shots for random things that don't matter, like Suyu running. It gives me hope that they will add a flair to this arc, along with the fact that each episode will be a complete fight. That I think this arc will be redeemed in some way going forward, as far as the general, I guess, normal person's experience. Because not everyone is going to go back and reread MHA, and they shouldn't be expected to. But, like you said, the experience it has currently for the general fandom is that. So I really hope that can change with the anime.
Yeah, and I mean, Bones isn't a stranger to fixing the manga's problems, like the summer exams. To go back to that, the like semester exams, those are infinitely more enjoyable in the anime, just because they made the decision to restructure it to the point where the fights were sequential, and actually also every fight takes up no less than 1 episode, which I think is, well, except Tsuyu and Tokiyami's fight, which has like a cliffhanger in the episode before, but it's only like the last 2 minutes or whatever. And so I could imagine Bones putting in the work for this arc, because Japan loves the students. Like, for some reason, they really, really love them over the villains, which, oh my god, let's not even get into what they might do with MVA, because...
If they're like, whatever, it's like Mirio. Nobody even likes that guy.
Yeah. I wake up in shivers after nightmares of Bones just skipping MVA. Because honestly, it's not impossible. It's not likely, but it's not impossible. Especially now that we've seen what that other studio did with The Promised Neverland, which, have you heard about that?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, they're editing things, but that's a whole other can of worms. I think Bones, because of what MHA means to them as like a studio in terms of just like people respect it because it is a moving manga, which I think can be better for better or worse. I think they will just, there's no reason to skip MVA. So, but the one other thing I wanted to bring about Appeal, since we're gonna go over the rounds later, do we want to save like favorite Class B characters or like unexpected favorites or like favorite moments for when we go from round to round?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say that makes the most sense.
Because I wanted to have this first half loaded with like, let's talk about the nitty gritty, and then I wanted the last section of this arc to be like, oh my gosh, and then he punched Todoroki and it was awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, for sure, we can do that then.
Okay.
One thing I want to say to the anime is that we already know who's handling certain scenes, and dude, the round 3 is apparently going to be handled by Yutaka Nakamura. So both Todoroki's and Ida's moments are going to get the Deku versus Todoroki treatment, which
so much
I'm here
love.
for.
Yes,
and
then the first fight we know is getting a lot of really ambitious stuff with like they have the Kaminari shot where he's rushing past everyone. It's this 3D angle and he's like flying through the scene and he's flowing, and then you have the other 3D shot of Suyu running, and it's like none of those shots did I ever think needed any love. So if you're if you're putting that kind of effort into that, then that fight is also probably set to be good.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, and this is again going to sound a bit more negative, I also think this arc has a very weird approach to paneling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think this is one of Horikoshi's lesser effective paneling arcs.
Okay.
Because I feel like I got lost during the action more often than I did maybe in any other arc of his. More than Overhaul and more than Pro Hero, which are usually the ones that people name when they talk about confusing action in MHA. But like especially the early rounds, I had trouble following what was happening at times. I did have to do a couple of double takes. And, I'm not stupid. I know some people will disagree with that, but I don't think I'm stupid. I have 2 working eyes. And so I do feel like there's just something about the paneling in this arc that feels kind of cramped. Like there are some panels where I'm looking at them like, oh, this definitely should have been a spread. Like, what is it? Tokoyami's Sabbath definitely needed more space, I feel like, because that one's like you see him fly around with his claws and he hits 2 people, but there's a lot of like white space and it doesn't flow super well. Him preparing for the Sabbath, where he's like, Hawks told me, speed beats power. That definitely needed to be a way bigger panel.
Yeah, because it's kind of like crammed into the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that way about most of the paneling until we get to like the second half of Todoroki's fight. And after that, I feel like Hori really got back into it. But again, this could very well be just overwork because obviously, you have to plan cool paneling.
Right. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's not like Hori is incapable of cool paneling because, dear God, the paneling of the War Arc is immaculate. Like, the War Arc has some of the best paneling in MHA, and that happened a year after joint training. So, I really think it's a mix of just Hori being overworked, and also I think the environment just did not work to his favor when paneling because it was kind of a lot of like these detailed tubes and whatnot. But I do appreciate the environment. I do think it's an interesting place to be fighting in, at the very least.
And I would actually, so that's where it's interesting, because I actually have I've never had any problems reading this arc. I actually think it's one of the easiest ones for me to read in terms of fights. Actually, reading the Shinso fight, and anytime Shinso catches somebody, like the way Horikoshi will give you a bait panel where someone will say something and then he'll have the other person get brainwashed to like throw you off guard. Like, it gets me every time. Every time he brainwashes someone, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I was reading the panels, and then boom, it felt like I got hit too. And or just simple things like, even though I would agree, like the Tokoyami shot gets kind of crammed in there, I still was able to like follow it and look at it and think it looked cool. So I don't know, maybe it's just for me, it just hit a sweet spot for me. But I would definitely agree that it gets better because obviously with the Bakugo fight, there's more spreads. With the Todoroki fight, he adds more spreads. So like you said, he gives himself more breathing. And honestly, if we were to talk to Horikoshi right now, I can provably say, because in one of the volumes he says, yeah, I didn't like how the last fight went because it was really crammed with words and speech bubbles. So you are right, but it just didn't affect me.
Well, I mean, that is the Chad mindset. You're just built different.
It happens, you know. That's what happens when you're Deku and you explode. So, you know. You just gotta be ready for these things. You gotta take them on the chin and the arms and the legs. So.
And literally every other bone in your body, yeah.
And every other bone in your body 6 times over. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else as far as appeal. Like, I actually think, moving past paneling, I actually think that in terms of... Because you know how Hori's, obviously, his art style kind of shifts and grows throughout the series. Sometimes Deku's hair is kind of like more angular, and sometimes it's more fluffy. Sometimes it goes more realism, like in the Overhaul arc, and sometimes in the War arc, he went more back to his older style, and it was more stylized. I actually think that this is probably in my top 3 favorite art styles for the characters, like their designs. The way he like makes the paneling of when Todoroki's fighting Tetsu, he adds in the heat wave effect on the panels, or just the way he draws like that night scene with Dark Shadow and Hawks carrying him around, and it was like this beautiful like little atmospheric scene, or just the way Shinso's design has kind of been upgraded and you can kind of get more expression out of him. I really think the character designs in general in this arc are top notch, like, which has to go a long way, obviously, because you need to fall in love with these characters because they're only going to be here this arc, a lot of them. And I think in that case he really went above and beyond to try to just give as much life to these people, and I really love looking at it. Like regardless of the paneling, I think it just looks really pretty, like really gorgeous. So in terms of just the characters themselves, like I could take many panels and just be like, all right, that's my phone icon for the day.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I felt like coloring half of the panels I was reading, so you are right on that. They are all very cool looking, even if I don't necessarily like how they are in sequence.
Yeah, of course.
The entire event of Tetsu going through Todoroki's flames, that is some of Hori's best art, like straight up. There is one panel at the beginning of one of the chapters, it's like the cover page, and you have like Todoroki backing up and Tetsu like advancing towards him, and it is super detailed. Like Hori went like and cross-hatched their clothing and shit, and it's a small panel, but it just kept getting me. Like that entire sequence, he went to like a really detailed style with the character designs as well. And it's really impressive. Like, honestly, I think the only artistic technique I haven't seen Hori employ yet is faux which is like fake blur.
Yeah,
he hasn't done that yet, but I can almost taste it. We'll get it. It just feels like a him thing to do.
I believe he has. It's just never been like the focus of the scene. Like there's been shots where like someone's hand will be at the top of the panel. Like I'm thinking specifically of Eri touching Lemillion's face, and the top of her hand is blurry, and it's not because she's using her quirk. Like the lines just get more blurry as it reaches for the panel. But you're right in the sense of like he's never used that as like the look at this awesome I can draw. You know, like it's probably used more as like spice that you don't even notice.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and then the last thing I want to mention, since we'll go round by round, is I love the little banter in between each round. Like, I thought I would be really annoyed, but I actually loved the little breathers with, like, Bakugo talking to Deku, or just all the Class B kids. I love that they have this underdog mentality, and it really makes you, like, root for them, and also it doesn't feel lame whenever, like, for example, like, at the end of the arc, obviously, the Class A wins or whatever, and you don't feel like, oh my gosh, Class B is a bunch of losers, because they all have that mentality that, ugh, why do they think that they're better? We just got to keep trying. We're studying, we're trying our best, and you do genuinely walk away feeling that yeah, they're the underdogs and they're the heroes of their own story, and like, yeah, it sucks to be Class B and it sucks to have to be the secondary cast, but you love that they have an arc where they're like, we're going to put our best foot forward and just do the best we can. And I really love seeing that after every fight. Like, they don't feel, like, mean-spirited or anything. And surprisingly, Monoma doesn't feel mean-spirited. He's always like, don't worry, guys. Like, you should have done this, but that's okay. And he's being encouraging. You have Kendo, who wants to surpass Momo. You have Tetsu, who wants to give it his all. You have Monoma and his deal. You have Shinso, who wants to prove himself. And then you just have Vlad King, who's like, during the fights, he'll be like, come on, Tetsu, punch Shoto, you can do it, get him in close combat. Or he'll be like, Spiral Guy, you hit Ida just a little bit, you're the real MVP of the fight, my guy, you're the one.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the banter. I really like, and this is a general thing for MHA, but this arc does do it very well. I like it when we get the sense that there are relationships between these characters that are developing off screen, that are developing just by the virtue of these characters inhabiting, the same school. And this arc is one of the best examples of this. Like, there's all these little dynamics that you have with people that feel established, that feel based on, like, mutual respect and, like, just liking. Like, I get a sense that the Class B characters, they like each other. They enjoy being a class. Like, the fact that Monoma, who is the pettiest person in the entire cast, is genuinely amicable with pretty much everyone is cool. Like, it gives them that extra layer. And, when people hear the word character depth, they always think of, these Shakespearean tales of tragedy and comedy. But, like, depth can sometimes just mean, the fact that Kuroiro is really edgy and respects Tokoyami because he's also really edgy.
He gets really nervous and has a crush on the mushroom girl, where he's like, "Hey,
yes.
is it okay?" And then she's like, "Oh, that's our Kuroi." And then he goes, "Hmm." And then in his head he goes, "That's our Kurori."
yeah. His crush on Kinoko is actually really cute. Like, it comes up a total of like 3 times, but I was happy every time it did.
Well, and it's the thing you're talking about of it's just little bits of depth that you know that these characters exist outside of this battle space of quirk and name.
Yeah. It's like, it's just cute. It's neat. It makes them likable. And it makes me, like, invest into these characters despite the fact that they will never be important. Like, we will never get the epic arc of Kuroiro having to win over Kinoko's love, right? Like, that is never
right.
going to happen outside of fanfictions. And that's fine, because what Hori is giving me here is enough for me to gain my own appreciation for these characters. If anything, it just reinforces my idea that Hori is absolutely great at implicative development, at the idea that you just plant these little seeds and then let them grow naturally by just having the characters bounce off of each other. And you also mentioned Class B's like role as the underdog. I think one big thing that contributes to them not feeling like losers is the fact that they put up one hell of a fight. Like,
yeah,
even Bakugos fight, which is the whole point of it is that they're getting washed. Even that one is really cool and has all the Class B folks pulling off really nice maneuvers. Like, none of these fights are just, oh, there goes Class A being super strong. And the only one that gets close to it is, oh my god, Class A does a thing we couldn't predict, but our plan was actually pretty good. We just were really unlucky. And it just makes you respect
which is
these
the
characters.
Bakugo one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just gain a lot of appreciation for Class B here, and I really hope we get more on them. Like, of course, knowing where the story is right now, I doubt we will get another joint training arc, but I would like to see, like, just I want to know what Monoma thinks of Deku fighting Shigaraki, because that is going to be so juicy if that is actually a thing they bring up. Like,
yeah, or just like I think the 3 that we will consistently check in on is Tetsu, Kendo, and Monoma, just because they have been placed as higher. Like, Kendo and Tetsu had the camp arc, and then obviously Tetsu has his funny bromance with Kirishima, and then Kendo has consistently been there to deal with Monoma. So so they're placed as higher, and I think we will keep with them. But yeah, I would really like to continue to keep up with them. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, if there's one character I do want to actually, if 2 characters that I do want to see do more, it's Tokage and Honenuki, because they're the recommendation students. And I feel like that already sets them apart to the point where I want to have them present more often. Because, like, I'm gonna say this again when we get into the fights, but Tokage is such a weird character. She, like, just appears. Like, we have seen her before, like, in Sports Fest and the camp.
Of course.
But it's like, randomly Monoma is introducing her, like, she's the other one that came into recommendations. And it's like, okay, who's this girl? But she's cool. She has a cool quirk. And then Honenuki, as we already discussed, is just the coolest guy. I love him.
He's like the MVP of his fight.
Yeah, and like I like how he doesn't have like a typically like a typical smart guy design or like a typical like leader design. He just looks like a fucking titan. But yeah, he's so nice. He's so cool and so smart. Like I really enjoyed him this time around, and I think it's just strengthened by like the strength of his design. Like the only thing I don't like about him is his hero costume. Like I wish his teeth were more exposed, because that's my favorite feature of his. Because like when Ida breaks off half of his mask and he has like his armor suit on but his face is exposed, I think that's when he looks the best.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, I definitely understand that. I would personally just have like, other than Ida, just because like I know him, I would just personally have none of the heroes have like full masks, just because I want to, I want to see their faces.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, I would just. That's the thing. There's just a lot to love about this arc, and I will definitely get more into like just gushing about like just silly stuff once we get to the fight. But I think overall, that's the appeal of the arc, is just that if this is an arc for My Hero fans, I feel like, and if you are not a My Hero like big fan, if you just really enjoy it for certain aspects, or like if you're not all in basically on just like the idea of being a My Hero fan, if it's just something you enjoy, then yeah, I could totally understand this arc just being like, what is happening? Who cares? Sure, I like Todorokis, so sure, I'm good with his fighter. I like Bakugos, so I'll pay attention to that. Or maybe I like Momos, so that's okay, but she lost, whatever. But like, if that's where you're at, then I totally understand how this arc, like, it really shouldn't be here. This arc really shouldn't exist. As you said, it is the embodiment of fluff outside of the Shinso Deku stuff. But as a leaf, as a branch extended by Horikoshi saying, all right, guys, you love these characters, just please deal with the fact that it has to happen now, because obviously I don't think he thought of this earlier. He's still early on in My Hero at the time of final exams, trying not to get, like, canceled. Now he got his anime. Like, understanding it from that perspective, and as a My Hero big fan myself, I accept your love letter, Horikoshi, and I will date you. So and that's my understanding of the appeal, is that Horikoshi finally let his emotions out to me, and I accept.
Dear viewer, this was all just an excuse to announce that IanWaffles is now happily married to Kohei Horikoshi. I am marrying
Kohei Horikoshi, that is right.
Oh my god. I wouldn't want to be married to him. Imagine having a husband that works so hard. Like, Jesus.
Oh boy, I couldn't stand it. I'd feel so inferior. Because all I do is read his manga.
I just feel so sad for him sometimes. I mean, that's a general thing for mangaka. Like, whenever you...
But he's one you really like, so you're more attached, obviously.
Yeah, of course, but all mangaka, to a point, I'm like, Jesus, you are living a horrible life, but I do appreciate what you do for us. So it's like...
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to get into the big cheese?
Yeah, let's talk about the big cheese.
I realized today while I was reading it, once the anime gets to it, we are going to have the whole 6 quirks discussion all over again.
Oh, no.
Like, the anime onlys are gonna start posting fucking videos and tweets about how, Deku's overpowered now. He just got all 6 quirks at once, which he doesn't. And the story's ruined. I don't know if I'm ready for that again. Like, it almost killed me last time.
Yeah, to be fair to the anime community, I have seen very many discussions like Blind Wave or Semblance of Sanity or the Normies. Those people seem to put together the idea of like, wait a second, if the quirk is to pass on more quirks, why doesn't he have other quirks? Well, I guess that's just not how it works. So so maybe they'll actually accept it more and be like, I was a genius, I called it.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember when this reveal happened, I did not have a problem with it. I even made like an immediate video about it probably my like lowest effort video ever of me just kind of talking about it because I just wanted. Oh my god! I remember I dropped that, and I dropped my like big Endeavor video the day after, and that video flopped. But my low effort talking about the reveal video took off, and I was like, God damn it, I hate it. But
the YouTube life.
Oh man, no, but like even at the time, I was like, well, that's cool. And it kind of fits with what we've known about One for All so far because, yeah, the quirk transfers quirks, so why would it not transfer every quirk? And the answer so far had been, as you said, I guess that's not how it works. But now we know that is how it works. And with that part, I never had a problem. And I find it really weird how, like, vitriolic the reaction to this reveal was.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of it was just being traumatized from other series that overpowered their protagonist. And of course, from the fact that at the time, fan scans were much more common. And the fan scans did make it seem like he was getting all the 6 quirks, like, immediately. Like,
yeah, because I think the guy literally says, like, you're about to get all our quirks. And it's like, now? What? Yeah. And then he immediately activates it, like, the next chapter, catching Shinso's, like, the things he drops. So you're like, oh my gosh, did he master it in a second?
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't have, like, the proper translations, it really seems bad. But, like, reading it now in the volume with the, like, cleanly translated dialogue, it's very, very clear, like, you are going to eventually unlock all these quirks, and you will only have limited control until you get yourself, you know, in check. Which, you know, I think for the time, that was good. Now, I believe everyone here, you, me, and everyone listening, or hopefully everyone, already knows my opinion on Black Whip and how it's been handled from this moment onwards. Because honestly, I like this reveal less than I did back when it first happened.
Oh, okay.
Just because I know where it's led us, I like it considerably less. Because at the time, when it happened, I was like, okay, if Hori spaces this out well, if he gives us like a nice, you know, structured journey of Deku slowly unlocking these quirks, and in the process learning more about, you know, the quirks themselves, the users, the history of One for All, that's super cool. Like, if it actually takes him time to acclimate, that is super cool. But again, it was all predicated on Hori doing that. And he just didn't. He just said, okay, you really did not like this training arc. No more training arcs.
No more training arcs? Yeah. No. Oh, poor Endeavor Agency, even though that arc's great too.
Yeah, but I have said it many times before, but every time Deku explains Black Whip to anyone, I die inside a little because it's so stupid.
Let's go into this whole rant because I don't feel this vitriol as much as you. Like, I'm just like, yeah, that's dumb. But you really care about this, and I think you have good reason to. So I want you to, like, just go into this idea of, like, nobody questions this at all, like, to any reasonable capacity.
Yeah, so the thing with Black Whip and now Float and now Danger Sense is that they are very different from Deku's normal abilities. They are in no way quirks that you could just say, oh yeah, they just actually are just different types of my super strength. Like, even like I've seen people say, like, oh, you know, Black Whip, he could explain it like, oh, that's the energy that gives me super strength, but
he doesn't. He doesn't explain it that way. That's headcanon.
Exactly. That is headcanon. And the thing is, Deku's dialogue when he explains Black Whip is infuriating because every time he talks around it. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just like a thing my power can do, I guess. And it's like, why is no one immediately suspicious? Like, and the first time that happens, Hori acknowledges that this is stupid because Todoroki comes up to him, he's like, I didn't know you had 2 quirks. And Deku's like, oh haha, no, it's actually just a new type of my super strength. And Todoroki's like, oh, that's all right, I guess. And you have Bakugo thinking, my god, Todoroki's an idiot.
Right. Which makes sense for Todoroki's character, I think.
Yes, but then Endeavor Agency happens, and you have Deku explaining it to Endeavor, who is canonically a really smart guy. And Endeavor is just like, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, he doesn't even have, like, an offhand, like, thought bubble of, like, that's really strange. I'm going to keep an eye on this boy. Even if it was just that, I think I would be a little better with it.
Yeah, and here's the problem. It feels so artificial. it feels like Hori is just avoiding having to deal with marrying Black Whip to the narrative properly. And, you know, that is a problem that starts in this arc. Because there is that scene, of course, where everyone's questioning Deku about what happened. Ooh. And his responses are, like, completely unsatisfactory to anyone with a brain. But the scene just ends with them not questioning it anymore. It's like, does he have a secret quirk that makes everyone really dumb?
Yeah, it really feels like wait a second, Clark. How come you and Superman are never in the same room at the same time or whatever? And then he's just like, why don't we just like go get coffee? And then he trips it like, oh, that Clark, he's a fool. He could never be Superman. And then nobody thinks about it again. It's like,
yeah, and it's just annoying that is how he chooses to handle these quirks, because when the reveal first happened, I was like, okay, this is the point of no return. One for All is going to have to become like an actual plot point now, and not just, you know, Deku's power. And to a point, it has become a plot point. It has become important, but not necessarily in the ways I would have liked it to. I would have liked, you know, the class to have a brain and be like, well, wait a minute. This is not what your quirk usually does, and it's very far removed from, you know, any conception of super strength. How do you explain this? And
yeah,
like,
and they don't have to jump to. I've seen some people say, like, this has always annoyed me, which is that how come people, like earlier in the series, like, how come people don't just know that Deku having super strength means that All Might has the ability to give him his power and keep it himself, and that because they hang out, that means that that's the case. It's like, you are jumping to many conclusions here that people would just expect, like, oh, because All Might hangs out with this boy who also has super strength like him, that means he can transfer his power. You have jumped very far. And similarly, people will jump to this idea of like, well, they see he has this extra power, so clearly he must have One for All, the power to pass on powers, and it's like they don't know about any of that. But your point of just like, yeah, why don't just anybody question this, could have been easily solved if you just had Bakugo come in, because Bakugo is like the guy who people think either hate Deku or it's like, oh, he's like, they're kind of like childhood friends or something. It's weird. If he had just spoke up for him or just said like, you know, this or that, even that would have gone a long way. But because it's Deku himself, who the class knows is like is known for just being like, oh, you know, ha ha ha, and just, you know, you just have to kind of go along with that Deku's quiet about things. The fact that they fully accept it is the problem, and it just makes them all look dumb.
Also, can I just say I absolutely adore every time you go high pitched, like the segment where you imitate Dobby in the last episode.
Well, thank
Dobby.
you.
I love it so much.
It's me, Dobby. I burned myself for fun, making my dad happy. Woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, that's Dobby. That's how he sounds. But and then my one other thing, I was like, and obviously I have hindsight 2020, but the fact that all you could have done to, I think, fix this immediately is just have Monoma, like, if they're like, Deku, literally what's wrong with your power? Deku explains, and then Aizawa, who, if I could deal with, like, the kids not saying anything, because I always think, like, if, and I'm just kind of lowballing the kids, obviously, but when I think, like, if I were in that world, I'd be like a Kaminari type who I'd be like, well, that's kind of weird. Anyway, I gotta go do math. And I just wouldn't ask about it. But the fact that Aizawa doesn't say anything is a problem. So I would just have him be like, all right, cool, that doesn't answer my question. And then just have Monoma come in, and he says, actually, I might know what's going on, because Monoma's not a bad guy. He comes in and he says, hey, so earlier I said his quirk is a blank. It's because his quirk is a stockpile quirk. So maybe we all thought that it was stockpiling super, or Deku, maybe you thought your quirk was stockpiling super strength because I wasn't able to activate it, but it might actually be stockpiling something else. You should probably get that looked at. Like if he just explained that, I think people would be more willing to be like, yeah, that's weird, but like Monoma's making it seem like, because this is how he understands quirks, he's like, oh, it's a quirk that works this way, so maybe there's just more to it that we don't know about. Maybe you should look into that. And then that would be, I feel like that would satisfy me, because again, even if I were a smart or a dumb person in the world, I would be like, well, why would Monoma lie? Like, like why would Monoma stick up for Deku and or lie about it? Like, okay, that makes sense. He knows how his quirk works. He felt Deku's quirk. He probably understands something about it. Cool. I hope Deku gets that figured out. Best of luck, buddy. But we don't have that. We just have the very meta, you can feel the author's hand being like, and you're all stupid today. Shush, 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 shush. And then we move on, and he's like, please don't think about it. Like, just give me a sec. Just let me wait.
Yeah, like, it's really disappointing because it feels like Hori's at his most amateurish.
Yeah.
And again, and to kind of wrap this back around, this also kind of goes for how he handles the progression of the 6 quirks. And we talked about this in the last episode, so to not, like, rethread old ground too much, I think the 6 quirks have not been handled well. I think they've popped up too frequently with too little build-up and too few, like, supporting pillars of Deku actually training them and training to unlock them. I think Hori should have really committed to these 6 quirks being milestones to be unlocked throughout the entirety of MHA. You know, one after every couple of arcs maybe, and each one of them like a big triumph, and each one of them coming at the tail end of Deku learning something about both the quirk and the history of One For All. But now we're in this weird space where he just unlocks them, and he doesn't get any context to even really, like, what these quirks were and who they were used by. Like, the 5th user, Banjo, he looks cool. He has a super cool design. All One For All users have fantastic designs. But we don't get anything on him. We don't get any, like, real connection with him. We don't really get any idea that this quirk was something that we should look forward to. And it's just odd. And especially the thing that takes me out is that you already have this setup where, okay, the vestiges are these crystallization of not just the quirk, but the personality of the previous users. And to me, when I read that for the first time, I was like, bet, he's going to learn more about One For All the more he progresses. He's going to see more stuff in the vestige world. He's going to learn the entire history of the quirk. And that is how we're going to get, like, the flashbacks. And I was like, yeah, bet, that sounds awesome. And it would follow up on the vestige scene at the start of this arc. But no, like, nothing. Like, the one time we've returned to the vestige world, it's been for Nana and the first user to just say a bunch of stuff about Deku.
Yeah, it wasn't past stuff. Yeah, it wasn't learning anything. It was present day. We're dealing with the current stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, it's such a missed opportunity, because if Deku had been having, like, these dreams reoccurringly, I think that would have been super cool. And now that he's in a coma in the, you know, as he's in the story right now, I hope we get that. Like, I hope we get, like, more time in the vestige world and more time of Deku actually interacting with it, because now, of course, he has unlocked more power, and therefore his body can manifest more strongly in the vestige world.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, and I'm hoping this can wrap back around to, like, not necessarily, like, fixing it in the moment, but just give me more reason to, like, be it. It's a strange thing. It feels weird that I've been more hyped for Deku learning how to kick and flick air than I have ever been of him learning to fly and shoot, you know, black lasers out of his hand that grab things. Like, and that's where, like, I guess my PTSD of shonen keeps me from being too angry at this, because my first thought when I saw this was I didn't think about the fact that this made sense. So my brain went to the worst case scenario of, like, my heroes jumped the shark. This doesn't make any sense. This is going to ruin the series. He's just going to get all these powers. He's going, and not like he's going to be overpowered, but just like all this stuff is just going to bog it down. And so for me, if the worst I can say is like, man, this cool concept isn't being as cool as I want it to be, which I'm not trying to downplay in terms of your, like, people's actual criticism, but that's where it feels for me, is that it's a cool thing that he's not doing enough cool stuff with. For me, I can just kind of deal with it where I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness it didn't break the series. But as you said, you never thought it was going to. You saw all the potential. I did not. So for me, I'm in this place of like, oh, thank goodness. Thank you that it did. So you know, so for me, it's harder to get disappointed by it. But I understand the disappointment completely.
Yeah. I mean, I understand your perspective as well, obviously. Like, I don't think this derails the series, like, by any means. Like, MHA is still a strong 9 out of 10 to me, right? Like, here I am, like, talking down about, oh, this 9 out of 10 isn't a 10 out of 10. How could it? But, like, it is definitely the most disappointing element in, like, modern MHA. I just think
Yeah,
that
of like
there
the
was
broader scope of the pillars of the series. Yeah.
yeah, like I just think there was so much there Hori could have done, and he did kind of nothing with it. Like, aside from cool fight choreography during the fight against Shigaraki, I don't think the multiple quirks added any of the stuff I wanted them to add. Like, we didn't get extra context on the world. We didn't really get any like deeper dive into what quirks really are, which I thought would happen because, you know, it establishes that the quirks are permanently interlinked with your personality traits, because obviously your personality influences your quirk and your quirk influences your personality, yada yada yada. Like, I thought that that was going to be the opportunity Hori was going to use to really explore, like, what is a quirk and how does it interact with who you are. No, Deku just unlocks danger sense because he was sleepy, and it's disappointing. But
yeah, and to anyone in the comments who is going to be like, well, obviously the series isn't over, of course, but as Oceans has said before, we exist in the now, and so we're just talking about what has happened so far and how this arc affects what we have right now. Of course, I really do hope that a few years from now I can be like, sure, Black Whip and Float were kind of like flimsy, but like he went all in on Danger Sense and the next one and the next one, and he eventually he did show Banjo's whole backstory, and that was great. So, but for now, we're not gonna, I don't want, you know, it's fun to project in the future of like the series is gonna be good, or even get doom and gloom and be like the series is gonna be bad. But in the moment, this is how it is, and this is how it kind of feels for now. But obviously, we want it to get better, and we think it's not like completely derailed or like it can't come around. But for now, he hasn't done much with it. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, we wouldn't be sitting here talking for, what is it, an hour and 15 minutes at this point, because we hate it and we think it's going nowhere. Like, the fact that I think MHA is going to continue to be good kind of goes without saying, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. But, you know, at the same time, no one can predict the future. No one can know what Hori's gonna do. Like, Hori is way less predictable than people pretend he is.
Yeah.
Like, I was there when Pro Hero was coming out weekly. I don't care what you say. No one predicted what was gonna happen with Endeavor. Like, no one saw that one coming. And I know because I was there. So, like, we can't know what Hori's going to do in the future. But at the same time, I am just tired of sitting here and telling everyone, guys, it's about to get real good. Just give it 3 years. Like,
yeah, let's just talk about the stuff that is real good right now.
Exactly, right? Like, Uraraka is my favorite example because I've been saying, guys, she's about to get so good since 2018. So, you know... But we've gotten into that already.
Yeah, of course, and we'll have some. I think, as far as I know, we'll have some positive things to say about her this arc. So we'll say when we get there.
That is true. That is true.
And then I guess the last thing would be So just for people to know, we have 6 quirks, vestige shenanigans, and Deku's resolve as this portion of our script, or like our little structured thing. So we've talked about vestige shenanigans. You know, we don't really have problems with it. 6 quirks. We've talked about how it's been added to. The one thing I'll say about the vestiges is I really, really like that, and this will go into Shinso later, but I really like that this thing that was like set all the way back at Sports Festival, that at the time everyone was like, what the heck is this? Because it just felt like a big cop-out to save Deku. I really like that Hori remembered that, and he's just like, nope, it's time to go in. I had this plan since the start. And I really like that the way he allows the vestiges to become more sentient is he ties it to the singularity. So, for example, All Might says that, like, you're probably at, like, 5% in this Sports Festival. And so when he goes into the dream state that Shinso puts him in, he just sees, like, little flickers. And he only sees it when he's looking at All Might. So they would be, like, near him, right? That's changed in the anime, like, it's a bit different, but that's how it is in the manga. And then finally we get now where Deku is in his little dream, and they can come in and give him a little bit of the past, and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't go any further because you're only at 20%, but we've passed singularity. And I like this idea that because the quirk has reached singularity as Deku's getting into it, it's gotten to this point where it can become more sentient, to where when we get to the war arc and he's reached 45%, it's actively talking to him. Like, it's like, hey, Shigaraki's coming. So I like that there actually is a progression here, and it's not just like, whatever, now he can talk to the avatars whenever he wants. Who cares? Like, in this arc, he still needs Shinso. And when he goes into the vestige world because of Shinso, the Black Whip guy is like, oh, I guess I'm already out of time. I can't talk to you that long, you know? And so it's like a very small thing. Like, I feel like it'll go over most people's heads and no one's going to care about it but me. But as someone who really values that I like when things that happen early on in the series, instead of getting a twist that says, ooh, it wasn't at all what you thought, it was a completely different thing, and discard the feelings you used to have, it's add on to it. It's like, oh, you thought this? Well, actually, it's this and this and this, and you get to keep all of it, and it's a flow. So I just really appreciate that. I think it's a cool technicality of how the quirks, the vestiges work, and yeah, I just think that's really neat.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I just like the way the vestiges like interact with Deku. I think it gives the quirk such a mystical feel.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, it almost feels like magic, but it's still within that framework of the mystery of what quirks really are, fundamentally.
Yes.
And on this reread, like, one phrase that really got me was when Banjo says, "You are the one who will complete one for all." We still don't know what that actually means.
Yeah.
Like, what does completing one for all actually entail? Does it mean just mastering all the quirks inside it? Or does it mean something else?
Yeah.
Because obviously, just mastering the quirks is just taking what came before. Whereas completing, to me, implies that there's a very active element that comes from Deku. So, I am interested to see what this means. I mean, you know, Hori could be straightforward with it and just mean it's that he masters the quirks and defeats All for One and eradicates all for One users.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see where he goes, because especially now with the War Arc, he's definitely started getting more into like the mystical stuff of quirks, like with All for One's vestige inside of Shigaraki. And you definitely get this feel that quirks are more than just physical abilities. They are interlinked into your psyche, which I'm cool
great.
with. Yeah,
it adds on to everything we've seen before.
Yeah, that's the thing. When like this reveal first happened, people were like, "Oh, it's so contradictory. Like suddenly quirks are magics." Like, have you been paying attention? Like, not to be mean, but quirks have been interlinked with your personality since day one. Like, it's been
or you're just your psychology.
Yeah, like the entire point of quirks is that it's kind of like an egg and chicken question. Like, does the personality influence the quirk, or does your quirk influence your personality? And I think the answer is both, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and they're always described as extensions of people, like they're a muscle, or they're like like they've always been interlinked with a person. And MHA seems to believe that people have souls, which is fine. So it's gonna go into that and see how it's kind of connected to you. So
yeah. All right. Do we want to say something on Deku's characterization then, since that's the Deku's resolve portion of our little notes?
Yeah. So can I go into this, or would you like to?
You can go. Deku's your guy.
Yeah. So with Deku, as we can kind of see from, it's a kind of a low-key development, because it's never given like the shonen like, and this is what I learned. But after Overhaul arc, where Deku goes in with this idea of like, I'm gonna save everyone, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna do all these things. And he has all this confidence. But in the Overhaul arc, obviously, he Night Eye dies. He doesn't save everybody. He only wins because of the help of outside forces. And people were very worried for him. So that didn't work out very well. And then, obviously, this leads him to wanting to get rid of One for All. And so he kind of goes into this kind of like, not depression, but just this state of like not believing in himself, not knowing what to do, and feeling this burden, this even more burden placed on him, which he then overcomes in the gentle fight, where he restates what he believes in, which is that instead of always win, always save, and make no one worry, it's people believe in me, and they have got me this far. My dream is no longer for them to push my dream forward, and so therefore I have to complete my dream because of them. My dream is to do things for them, to give all the people who believed in me and helped me a bright future. And today, Gentle Criminal, that bright future is to make sure this little girl can have a fun time at a concert. And I really like that kind of progression of Deku's character, to where when we get to this arc, he goes into the fight and he's like, sure, my quirk's kind of messing up. But like, we forget how like scared Deku was at the start of the series, where like he would just like walk up, like just even in like a normal fight, he would have to like force himself to smile in the sports festival race, and it looks like a Charlie Brown smile. It's so squiggly. Or like he's terrified of all that stuff. So when he goes into this round and he's confident and he's like, we can do this, we're gonna win, it really shows how far he's come. So when you have that moment of like, yes, I've beat Gentle Criminal and kind of like redeemed myself in terms of like protecting Eri, I've gotten better at my quirk to where I can use like Air Force and all these things, I'm understanding more about it. So then you come to this scene where he uses the Black Whip, and he's just crying. He's like, no, I promised my mom that I would get better. I wouldn't worry anybody. I was making it my own. I was getting better. Stop One for All, stop. And he's like just breaking down. And it always gets me because obviously we love this character. We've seen the step by step of everything he's learned. And so to see like his quirk just betray him, like he says later, it's like, man, is it just never going to end? Am I never going to actually be able to accomplish or do anything with this power? Am I constantly going to be a burden on people? And so to have that kind of, that little moment of fear, and then obviously his friends help him out, and then he's able to overcome it by using the quirk just for a split second, by remembering his origin. And I remember at the time being like, that's kind of like just like your typical shonen-y, like, oh, believe in where you start. And yeah, it is that, but I feel like where it's placed in the story, I really like that you have this moment of Deku finding confidence, and he has this another roadblock that just came out of nowhere for him. And then he's still able to see, like, no, there are people who are here to help me, and there is a path that I am on and people that I am here for, and he's able to just kind of clear his mind and just be like, no, this is my quirk. And he's able to use it for a sec and move on. And so I really like that aspect of his character of just seeing this resolve, as I put it, of Deku looking like he's gonna fall back once again, and he's given this overwhelming new task of complete One for All. 6 new quirks are coming, blah, 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 blah. And just in a moment, he breathes, and he handles it, and he moves on. And I just really like that for his character. It's a very small thing, but I really love it. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, you kind of mentioned everything about Deku, which, you know, that's what you do. You are the Deku man. But yeah, you're absolutely correct on everything you've said. I absolutely agree. One thing that's really stuck out to me on this reread is his composure throughout all of it. Deku in the beginning of MHA is characterized by being a muttering, stuttery mess most of the time. Like, his confidence is one of those things that I also know a lot of people dislike about him, because for most of the series, he lacks it. He's, you know, stuttery. He gets into these comedic little speech bubbles where he's muttering and he's shaking and he's crying. And to see that character be here now, completely confident before the Black Whip thing, and even afterwards, still on his toes, fighting. Like, the panel where he says, "We will win, just follow my lead," that is so not early Deku, and I love it.
And you almost have to do a double take because we've so naturally got here. Like,
yeah.
I remember originally reading that and be like, all right, yeah, just another chapter. But it's like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah, that's not a Deku thing to say. And also, like, before the fight, when Baku is like, I've gotten stronger. You can't get a scratch on me, nerd. And
He's like, okay.
Yeah, back in the day, Deku would have been like, I guess not. But this time he's like, nah, I'll surpass you. And it feels so good to see that. Like, the panel where he's like, just watch me, that is so cool. Like, that is perfect. And I really think people don't give Deku's character enough credit for that. I do think that in the war arc, we could have gotten a bit more interesting dialogue on his part. So, you know, again, hindsight.
Oh, yeah, we talked about it where, like, Shigaraki and Deku, at a certain point, Shigaraki just kind of becomes the monster and Deku becomes the hero. But yeah, like, there's like that one little section of like when they're in the air and they're just kind of spouting like, I will stop you, you think. But that's more to do with just like the dialogue just being bad that week rather than just like, oh, the character's going downhill, you know. It happens. You know, sometimes I know, like, even people who like Bakugo, they can be like, all right, does Bakugo have to be like this loud? Like, it happens.
Yeah, but I like that also, like, already here you can see that development of Deku and Bakugo's relationship as well, because Bakugo is more like, he's not as destructive towards Deku as he was before, like, their little coming out that they had after provisional exams. He's much more like, you better work hard to surpass me. And Deku was like, I will, don't worry. And Baku was like, I couldn't hear you, what was that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the perfect way to put it. Like he's like a drill sergeant friend.
Yeah, like... exactly. It's literally as if you have a military general as a friend. That's actually the perfect way to put it.
Yeah, and it's really great because you can tell he's sincere. Like, whenever he just comes in on their conversation, he's like, hey, losers, maybe if you want to keep your secret, you don't sneak around in public all the time.
Yeah, I also like how out of the like one for all knowledge trio, All Might, Bakugo, and Deku, Bakugo is the only one who has like social tact to a certain point, where he's like, "Hey, you guys are really suspicious. Be more careful."
He also cares about it, seemingly like, not cares about it more, but he has more like, he feels like an audience surrogate to where like there's that scene where he's sitting down with All Might and Deku, and All Might's like, this is how the quirk works or whatever, and he's like, okay, so if it's this, then maybe it's this, this, and this, and All Might's like, oh, like, wow, he just jumped right in.
Yeah, which I mean establishes also how, or like not establishes, but reinforces how smart Bakugo is when he's not being really loud.
Yeah.
Like, it's another thing that people tend to forget, is that Bakugo is actually really smart and really capable. And this is another thing this arc does really well at reminding us that both Bakugo and Deku are genuinely smart and capable characters. Like, to get back to Deku, the moment where like his team is like all, oh, we have like sucky powers for combat, like I float stuff, I melt stuff, I stick stuff, we're not gonna win.
We're doomed.
And Deku comes in and is like, no, you're all great and you're gonna win this fight for us while I will be the bait. Like,
yeah, I'll be the bait is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. Also, oh my god, and this is something I loved even during the weekly read. When the enemy team is discussing their strategy and they say, our biggest enemy is Midoriya because he is incredibly dangerous, I was like, yes, this is what I want. I want the rest of the world to respect my guy. I want them to put respect on his name. Like, the fact that they say, if we underestimate him even for a second, we're toast, that's perfect. That is all I need. I need more people to say that about Deku, because, god damn it, we've seen this man break his bones for 7 years. I need people to acknowledge him.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. And one last thing on Bakugo is just simply that I know a lot of people, like, there was at least a section of time where, like, that little scene where Deku and Bakugo, they're walking past each other, and Bakugo's like, I'm doing real good, and Deku's like, nuh-uh, I'm gonna do better, and he's like, nuh-uh, loser. Like, that's basically the conversation. Like, people would use that to be like, this is, like, lame shonen rivalry, like, what is this? And I'm like, dude, when you look at where they started, this is enormous growth. Like, the fact that they can have, like, your typical shonen conversation and both of them be confident in it. Like, I went back to check the sports festival because there's the part where it's really funny where in joint training, Bakugo walks past Deku, and Deku's like, good job out there, and Bakugo's like, what, you want to die? And it says instinct under it. Like, but then Deku says, I'm not in your way, and he's not, like, scared or anything. I went back to the sports festival because I was like, surely there's a parallel here, because there always is, and I went to whenever the Uraraka fight ends, and Bakugo's walking up the stairs, and he sees, like, Deku, and he's like, nerd, you come here to die. And he's like, oh, I didn't mean to do anything. I'm just walking this way. Please don't kill me. Ha, 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 ha. And he just walks on. And it's, like, great to compare those two, right? To see, like, how far he's come to where, like, Bakugo can yell at him, and there's not even like, Deku didn't instinctually freak out, you know? And which is really great. Like, that shows how far they've come to where that Deku doesn't feel like he's being bullied anymore in terms of, like, his mental state of how Bakugo sees him. He genuinely thinks that Bakugo is just a loud boy, but he likes me. We're cool.
yeah, and that's really satisfying. Like, in general, I think Deku's progression is kind of low key, but once you pick up on it, it is actually genuinely satisfying.
It's immensely. You can track his smile. Like, you can track that, like, in the whatever test, the first test, he, like, tries to smile to put on a brave face, and he's like, I can't even move to, like, fight a robot. And then you go into, like, the race, and he's like, all right, put on the face to fight the robot. And it's like the Charlie Brown, like, squiggly face. Then you go to the Stain fight, and he's, like, sweating, but he's like, like All Might said, going against, meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. And he tries to put on a smile. And it's a little bit better. Then you go to the muscular fight, and he's like, oh god, I'm gonna die. And then he looks over at Code, and he's like, no, put on a smile. And he's like, it's gonna be okay. And then he looks more confident. And then from Overhaul onward, as soon as Eri said, please don't let me go, I am pretty sure he has not been scared since. He is just pissed off or really cool. And
awesome.
Again, nobody ever brings this up. It's so subtle, but you can track that stuff. And this leads to my final point, because I sent this to you, which is that, because this is the last chapter of this arc, which is the Eri conversation. And it's one of my favorite Deku scenes in the whole series, which obviously makes it one of my favorite scenes in the whole series because I love Deku, I love Eri, which is that Eri is feeling so down about her quirk. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. I'm making everyone's lives worse. And when we think back to all the way back in like chapter 72, where he's talking to Koda, Koda is also a distraught little child who's just like, what is going on with like society, like with heroes, basically, like his, my mom and dad, I don't, know what to think, and I'm mad, and I'm angry, and I don't know how to feel. And Deku's like, I know this guy who, like, he didn't have a quirk, but he thinks they're cool. So, like, maybe you could think they're cool. I'm sorry, I just brought you food. I'm really bad at this. And then later he's like, and he doesn't even look at him, like he's getting chewed out by a child. And he's like, I'm just going to leave this here. And then later he's like, man, what would All Might say to that kid? Now we get to here. And you have Eri, who's also in a similar perspective. And what does he do? He gets down on his feet to her level, and he's like, Eri, did you not forget? You're the one who saved me. You're awesome. And not only that, but your quirk can be used this way. It's like a knife to make yummy food. So I really think you're really special. And like, that is a huge step from where he started. And so to see Deku, who, My Hero is always about like kids looking up to heroes, and we have Koda obviously, but to see him actually be able to do that, not only in risking his life, because that's the way he won over Koda, it wasn't through talking to him, it was through action, which is what Todoroki suggested, but to see him finally be able to do that. He's done it in action, in Overhaul. He's done it in other action with Culture Festival and like Preserving. But now to finally see him talk to somebody, be confident, and give inspiration to a child, I think that's beautiful. And to see that development, the moment I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is why I love this character. Like why he's like one of my favorite characters of all time. So
yeah, I think that actually perfectly rounds out Deku. Like I don't know what else to add. He's a super cool character, and I hope that Hori delivers on him and on more of the Six Quirk stuff in the future, which is possible. I mean, we're now, like, that's the crazy thing about this current arc, just to kind of, a bit off topic, but man, it's amazing anytime a new MHA's arc starts, because you have no clue where it's going. Like,
right.
Yeah, like, it goes back to what I said about Hori not being that predictable. Like, you never know what he's actually going to do next. You think you know. You're like, oh, we're getting like an arc, right? With the kids doing
things. Then we're
things.
babysitting.
Yeah. We're like, oh, joint training is over. I wonder what we're going to get. And Hori's like, okay, how about a villain arc?
And you're like, villains versus the heroes, but we're following the villain. No. Only the villains for 20 chapters. Never see the heroes. Have fun.
Yeah,
you're like, I don't think you're supposed to do that.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I am interested to see where this goes.
Cool.
To move on, do we want to talk about the purple hair cabbage guy?
Yeah, he's basically the second man of the hour.
Yes.
So many years built up to this, so I'll let you take this, actually.
All right. I both love that Shinso gets this focus, but I'm also cautiously worried about it.
Okay.
I love it because Shinso is the kind of character that just appeared back in the sports festival, had a really cool concept behind him, and established a really interesting part of the world, and then just kind of disappeared, which I would have been fine with. I wasn't one of the people who really wanted Shinso to come back. Him coming back was cool because it built up on that, and I like that you can actually low-key track his development throughout all of the other arcs, because he appears almost in every arc once, just walking around and like ignoring Midoriya.
Or just having abs now, like in the culture festival.
Yes, I also love that. I love that he keeps getting stronger physically, where the first time they mention him, they're like, oh yeah, he's physically weaker than Midoriya, even without quirk. And then in the culture festival, you see him break a log with his bare hands.
Well, this is how it happened. Let me explain this. So his classmate, there's no dialogue, but I can feel it in my heart. His classmate goes, "I can't break this board," and then Shinso goes, "Bet," and he breaks it in half with his bare hands. And his classmate next to him's like, "Oh my gosh, Shinso's so cool!" It was the best scene in culture festival. I died.
Cool. It's so good, and I like that there's that, and I like that he comes back up, and I adore that he gets lined up with Aizawa. I think that is like, it took me completely by surprise because I didn't expect it, because I didn't expect Shinso to come back. But in hindsight, it's like, of course. Who else would take him under his wing, right? Like, Aizawa is the perfect guy to have Shinso as his student. Because as Aizawa says during the training flashback, he's like, yeah, so we have something in common. If we can't rely on ourselves, we are dead. Because we have no offensive capabilities beyond just being normal human beings. And we live in a world...
And in the sports festival, he was the guy to say, like, oh, he couldn't fight because of the robots. That's kind of unfair. Like, he felt bad for him even back then.
Yeah, and it's so cool. Like, it kind of establishes this sort of everyman thing, which, ironically, is probably the closest the series ever gets to a quirkless Deku kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because Aizawa and Shinso, outside of specific circumstances, are basically quirkless.
Yep.
Like, Aizawa's big strength is that he can bring others down to his power level. Unless they have a quirk he can't cancel, which happens kind of often. And Shinso, if the enemy knows about his power and is just careful, he just has to fight throwing hands. And so I really love that connection is established. The reason I'm worried is because you can't have an arc like this, and you can't do this with Shinso, and then never bring it up again.
Yes. Because, as we know currently in the series, if we go back to school, it's probably not for too long because things are falling apart at the seams. Like, we're 2 days in, and we're already destroying city blocks. So
yeah, exactly.
So where does Shinso, who the triumph of the arc is, he's gonna join the hero course? Where do you fit into that?
Yeah, exactly. That is kind of my big worry. Like, I can't think of a way he would become relevant. But I also think he needs to become relevant, because if he doesn't, joint training is going to lose a lot of merit in the long run, like retrospectively. Because
it's going to be even more it'll be even more like just fluffy fan fiction where it's like, well, that was nice. I wish it went somewhere, but
yeah, exactly, because like Shinso coming back and Shinso potentially becoming a mainstay is a big hook of this arc. And seeing like how his power works and his new the persona chords, which is such a cool gear, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, if Shinso doesn't end up becoming at least as relevant as Kendo, even more hopefully, then this kind of feels like a waste, right?
Yeah. I would say there's hope in it just simply based on the idea of we have to go back to the Aizawa thing. And if we're looking at the kids as being able to, Deku is going to surpass All Might, right? Bakugo's going to be Deku's babysitter. Todoroki's going to surpass Endeavor. Ida's going to surpass Ingenium. Stuff like that. I think it's very clear that the point of Shinso is to eventually make him because they effectively, Aizawa and Shinso, their powers serve a similar purpose, which is to immediately shut down the enemy under specific circumstances. I think going forward, he is, and he's even given the band, like the magic scarf, I think he is just going to be Aizawa's kind of replacement, like long term, in terms of like his role in the like who are you surpassing, who is your mentor to surpass. Obviously I don't know this, but I would just say that based on everything that's been set up, that would make sense. And also I would think it would make sense if he ends up becoming Eri's new like babysitter in terms of quirk control, because as he showed this arc, he can use his quirk to help people, because when he uses your quirk, he basically puts you to sleep, right? So if Aizawa, because we know that he's going to get an eye patch based on art and just based on like the fact when we see him, he has lost his egg and his eye, or a leg, and his eye is still out. If that cripples Aizawa's quirk in any way, then Shinso effectively, even if it's not for Eri, becomes the, under certain circumstances, I one-shot an enemy and I help out the crew, Yeah, so
exactly.
I would say long-term, he doesn't actually have to go to school with them. He just has to, this arc just works as here's Shinso's introduction to the rest of the group in terms of liking him, and then also just showing what he's got so the audience buys it,
Yeah.
So even if he doesn't specifically join the hero course, if we don't have that anymore, I think there's easy ways to just slot him right in. Same with Mei Hatsume, who has been hyped up to be like, oh, when you go pro, she's going to be your guy, who's making your gadgets. So I think it'll probably be like that, where he won't become, like you said, a kendo role, or maybe a little bit more. I would assume like a Mei Hatsume role, where in an arc where we need Deku to get a gadget, we go see that lady, and she's fun, and we like talking to her, and then we leave,
Yeah, and actually one thing that just popped into my mind is, I mean, I kind of don't think it's going to happen, but I think it will be cool if Deku, whenever he wakes up and he realizes he needs to step up his game, were to actually seek out Shinso and say, hey, look, whenever you brainwash me, crazy shit happens with my quirk. Let's do that systematically. Let's try and actually, like, access the vestige world. Because Deku is a guy who researches, right? He's a guy who observes and who tries to be empiric about how to develop strategies. So, as I said, I don't think this is going to happen because I don't know where it would fit, like, time-wise, right? Because now it's probably going to be very fast in the manga right now. But I still would appreciate that. I think you could do a pretty interesting training arc, basically, where Deku, maybe he's exiled, maybe he's in hiding, and he's with Shinso, and he's training his quirk, and whenever you realize he's made progress, he goes to Shinso and he's like, okay, bet, hit me. And he goes into the vestige world, and we get like a cool scene. Like that, Hori could use that to like give us a gradual, bit by bit exposition dump. Right?
Yeah, and that's how he used him this arc, too. Like, Hori could have very easily just had it be like, oh, the vestiges can talk now, we've reached singularity. But he's like, you know what, let's use Shinso for that. Like, that's Shinso's plot role, right?
Yeah.
So, if you want to just keep him around for that, that's also cool. And then, whenever we have our big, like, everyone suits up and fights, Shinso comes along because he's our bro now. So,
Yeah.
Like, you could easily do that. Like, I understand the worry, definitely. I just think that, based on what we've been given, it's not like, he's going to have to really grasp at straws. I think Hori has definitely ordered many drinks, and he can pull out many straws, So, when he takes me on the date, of course. So,
yeah. Like, now that I think about it, actually, like, imagine, like, in the next arc, and again, this is like a castle in the sky that I'm constructing. In the next arc, we get, like, get cuts between the society doing its thing, Endeavor and Hawks trying to keep it together, All for One reigning, and then in between we get little bite-sized bits of Deku training and using Shinso's brainwashing to communicate with the vestiges and to learn more about the world. I think that way you could actually create a really interesting arc where you have the present where everything is going to shit and Deku sort of researching both his power and learning about the past when things were going to shit already. I think that would be a really cool structure, but again, this is so specific, I definitely don't think it's going to happen because, dear God, Hori has bamboozled me all the time.
So many times.
Yes.
Right. But I think it's good to think of those things just in the sense of, regardless of if they happen, of just like, these are very reasonable things. Like, nothing you presented is like, oh man, think of like this scenario where the dream team of Aoyama, Deku, Shinso, and Momo team up to fight Toga and Dabi, who are on top of a blimp. Like, all you're saying is like, hey, this logically makes sense. Cool, we can keep Shinso. So I think that regardless of what form it takes, we're going to get something from him. But actually, if you have nothing left to say on him, I had one other point to say about Shinso and how he's used, what I really like.
Well, the only thing I want to say is that I love that the vestiges are actually linked to Shinso. Like, I forgot that they say this, but Deku explicitly says, somehow, whenever I meet Shinso, I can communicate with them. And that gives me hope that the fucking fanfiction I just wrote in my head could come through. Like, come on, Hori. I keep texting you, and one day you're going to have to respond.
One day you're going to have to stop leaving me on read.
Exactly, but now you can go. What's your point?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, basically, just as far as, like, if you're a big fan of Shinso, this is definitely a love letter to you, because he dominates round one. And I really like the way this is structured to where originally I was kind of disappointed with Shinso's inclusion because he does so well in round one, but then in round two he loses. Now, of course, I didn't think he was going to like curb stomp Deku or anything, but I was like, oh man, you could have given him the win, right? Or his team at least. But I really, like when I went back and reread, I was like, oh no, this was handled perfectly. Because the way it works is that he comes in, he does the thing that I wanted, which is he reestablishes himself. Like, he tells his backstory again. So even if you do know it, like, you get to see that flashback of all the kids being like, oh, don't use your quirk for evil, blah blah blah. So you get to like, oh yeah, man, poor Shinso. I hope he does well. And so he comes in and he's like, and what I want to do is I want to fight Deku. Because, you know, that was his match last time. That was where he was proven to be weak, and now he's grown. But what I love is that he says he still keeps this. Sure, he comes off standoffish, but he says this: I am going to be a hero, and I will use my quirk to save people. And that's the baseline. He is a good person. He is a kind-hearted person, and he wants to be a hero. So what I love is that we get to the 5th round, and he replays that in his head whenever Deku's quirk is going crazy of, I will use my quirk to help people. And he's just like, Deku, and he takes off his mask and he says with a smile on his face, let's fight. And and he's like, okay. And that really, I love that, because I was like, oh yeah, like, he wants to use his quirk to help people, not just like beat up bad guys. And so to actually see an application that makes sense, because if we're going to this post-singularity world, or just quirks being crazy in general, Shinso can legitimately use his brainwashing quirk to calm people down and help them and put them in a state where they can get their bearings. And so to actually see him use that and feel like happy about it, like, yeah, like, I'm gonna help Deku, I'm gonna use my quirk, and the way it's built up and he takes off his mask, I was like, no, that's perfect. And so that's why I think, like, Shinso's inclusion in this arc, it just feels so nice and fuzzy. Like, just that he's just given the spotlight to, he dominates round 1, and you could be like, oh my gosh, he's so cool. He worked out and he can rip those pipes. Yeah. and then in round 2, he gets to actually be a hero, and he gets to do it with the person that he's like, I'm coming in to beat you up. And he's like, no, I'm going to help him out. And so I really think that rounds him out really well, and I really love just goes back to Horikoshi and how he does body language, but whenever he's getting all the praise from everybody and Deku's hyping him up, and then as I was like, exactly, which is why Shinso, and he tugs on his scarf or whatever, and you can see like he's nervous, and he's like, and that's why Shinso will be joining us, and he's like grabbing at his chest basically, and you just see it on his face. He's like, oh my gosh, really? Like yeah, really? Yeah. And you just feel so happy for him, and it's like, you are like the sidest of the side characters in terms of like, you got a moment and now you can leave. Please don't come back. You don't need to. But the fact that, you know, the plot is just like, nah, buddy, have your moment, dude. And I'm like, I just feel so good for him. So he's not, you know, I know a lot of people love Shinso. They like adore him. He's not a personal favorite of mine. But like, if I was going to talk about my hero and how it does side characters, I would point to Shinso. And like you said, he's been brought up so many times throughout the story. It feels earned. It doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. So.
Yeah. Like, it's what I keep saying. It's like the implicative development. You just plant a seed and you come back to it every couple of days and see how it's growing. And then once it flowers, you're like, okay, bet. Let's take this flower out of its soil, and it's planted in a big action arc where it can throw some hands. That metaphor fell apart, but you know what I mean.
No, you get it. Don't worry. I've been using date metaphors, and you haven't called me out yet, so we're good.
Hey, look, man, if I could date Hori, as I said, I wouldn't marry him, but I would date him. He is a good-looking man.
Yeah, the gas mask really sells it.
I still love the fact that people always say that, oh, he once said in an interview that Mineta is a self-insert. Like, no, Aizawa is a self-insert because he's a tired, cynical man who looks exactly like Horikoshi.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's also said that Tamaki is a self-insert. Like, come on, guys, you're taking this way too literally.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, whenever a mangaka says they have a self-insert, they're always timid characters because I guess it's just kind of the culture in Japan to be humble, like the whole humility thing. Like,
which is nice.
Yeah,
I mean, he's also said he sees himself in Deku, you know, which is why I think he said in that interview one time, he's like, I really shouldn't have made him as boring as I did.
Actually, speaking of, this is just the last thing. I am so excited for his art exhibition, and I hope we get an art book of it. Like, yes, please. The piece that dropped today, it's already my phone background. It's so good.
It's so gorgeous, and like, like I just want him to do that for everything he can think of. Like, just like, it looks so good, and I was like, man, you get an art. I don't know how common this is. It probably is, like, they do this every now and then. But just like the fact that he's getting like an art exhibition, like you can walk in and on the wall you're gonna see Deku with his arms crushed and it says "My Hero" and he's screaming. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And I really hope we get that art book because obviously we can't go to that exhibition.
No.
I mean, even under normal circumstances, I couldn't exactly fly to Japan.
yeah, even married to Horikoshi myself, he still won't let me go. He keeps
Yeah.
me in the basement inking panels.
Horikoshi's like whole game plan is just marrying someone who's like really good at inking, so he can save on one editor.
And then he can tell her that he loves her without lying, because he's like, yeah, I couldn't do it without you, literally. Like,
They're like inking in All Might's shadows would literally kill me. You're saving my life.
yeah, I need you. Yeah, exactly. And he would never lie, so we're good. All right, but yeah, do you have anything else to say about Shinso, or should we get to the gush section of just like, that was so cool?
Yeah, no, I really don't have anything else to say about Shinso. I hope he comes back. I hope this like love letter to him wasn't just fluff, and I hope we see more of him. I do have one more thing to say, but I'll save that for when we get to talk to his rounds, which we'll get to immediately.
I was gonna say, speaking of Shinso,
yeah, speaking of Shinso, round 1, which is Shinso with Kaminari, Tsuyu, and
Kirishima Koda.
No, not Kirishima. Kaminari, you mean?
No, Kirishima's in there. He just gets one shot because he's thrown into Ibarra.
Oh yeah, I completely
Remember,
forgot.
because there's 5 people in this arc or in this round because he's there.
Right. Okay, yeah, I completely forgot.
It's one of my favorite uses of Kirishima in terms of just like meta, because it's like, Kirishima, you had your shine and overhaul. Get out of here.
Like move over. Yeah. No, okay, so the thing I want to say about Shinso in regards to this fight, holy shit, the persona chords are so cool.
Ugh.
Like, they look awesome. The name, persona chords, like, oh, we're JRPGing up in here.
Yeah.
And the way it's explained is so deliciously stupid, but also cool. It's like, oh, these ceramic plates, analogically...
They just make my voice change.
Yeah, they're like, analogically change my voice, and it's like, so you have mastery over to a point where you can hear someone's voice once and imitate it with ceramic plates.
It's ridiculous.
That's stupid, but I like it. So like,
your mentor has a magic scarf and you have a magic scarf. That, I remind you, the way Horikoshi decided to explain it was, because Bakugos like, what is this scarf? And he's like, it's got a special alloy and a wire in it. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, that doesn't explain anything.
Yeah, like, you know what? I actually, for the longest time, had a headcanon on how the scarf works. You want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it.
So, Hori is big on, like, pseudo-biological and pseudo-physical explanations. And when Momo does the scarf out of the memory alloy that, like, changes its shape in heat, I was like, okay, so what if, like, Aizawa's quirk, whenever he activates it, because it's a biological reaction, it's exothermic. It produces slight amounts of heat that he can then use to, like, change the shape of his scarf in tiny amounts so he can, move it. And it's still magic, and there's nothing in the series that suggests this, but for the longest time, that's how I explain it to myself. And
yeah, of course.
Like, the same way I have a pseudo headcanon about how Endeavor's quirk works, which honestly now, with the more we find out about Toya, I think is actually how it works.
Is true.
Yes. I mean, I generally do think it's true, because I think, and I actually will mention this in a future video to anyone watching, but I think actually Hot and Cold and Hellfire and Cremation, their quirk factors are localized in the skin. Like, the organ that produces the fire is the skin.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because it comes out of their skin, and their skin is flame resistant, but the inside of their bodies isn't. Right?
Except to boiling water.
Well, to be fair, and this is actually one thing we see in this arc, is that the wound on Shoto might just as well be frostbite.
Yeah, which is crazy. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And honestly, this isn't headcanon. Like, there's a good argument to be made because, Rei cools him down immediately after boiling his face, and that would produce a frostbite, and Shoto is not resistant to ice. At least not on that side. So, yeah, pretty cool. But to get back to Shinso, because this was a bit of a detour. Oh, you're good.
I love the persona chords. They are exactly what I love about quirks. It's that they kind of sit in that middle ground between this is a cool physical biological explanation, and this is just magic, right?
Right.
Like, Shinso's quirk has always been maybe one of the most magical ones, just because it has almost no explanation. It's just, I can brainwash people when they talk to me. It's kind of like Stain's quirk. Like, there is no way you could explain that logically, so Hori doesn't. He just goes, yeah, so he has this gadget that can, like, shift around tiny plates, and he can do that with 2 dials only, and he can account for every single voice variations and whatnot. Like, yeah, sure. Like, moving on.
It's so obtuse. Yeah, it's so obtuse and so like because you want to see Shinso be cool. Like, this isn't like he's going up against Shigaraki and he reveals this. Like, it doesn't feel like we said, this arc is so low stakes that you're allowed to kind of introduce these really crazy things, and like, why would you question it other than just to be pedantic?
Yeah, exactly. Excuse me. It is midnight.
You're good.
Yeah, so fight 1. Mainly the Shinso gets to show you what you can do now round, which also works to establish like the grudge match at the end of the arc.
But also Kaminari and Tsuyu, especially Tsuyu, who was everyone's like, favorite, waifu at the start of the series. But I really loved seeing her come back and do what she does best, which is just be competent and be cool. Like, her being like, hey, remember this one offhand detail about how my skin can create a saliva that kind of stings that we never did anything with? We're going to do that. We're going to make this plan where we mess with this guy, and I'm going to turn invisible and chuck a guy so hard that it breaks the sound barrier into the beast guy's head. Like, there's like waving effects, like a sphere. Like, she threw it so hard.
Yeah, and in general, Tsuyu is one of those characters that people make fun of her because she has a dumb design, but I like her. She is dependable, she is reliable, and she is cool. And as you said, I like that like her introduction in like the USJ arc keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Like, in the final exams arc, she's like, oh yeah, so remember how I said I can empty out my stomach? Anyway, yeah. So, and here it's like, oh yeah, remember my poison? Yeah, here you go.
It kind of reignites that love for her because it's calling back to when you did really love her, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I still like her. I really think she's a nice addition to the cast, as goofy as she is.
Yeah.
And of course, I am obsessed with lightning abilities in fiction, so
Kaminari was so good.
Yeah, Kaminari literally doing anything is always something I love seeing. And I like while I was reading this, because there's a line, I think that when they get feedback, Aizawa says that Kaminari didn't act before it was too late. He waited until his teammates had already gotten into trouble before he really took action. And I immediately connected that to his scene in the war arc, where like, they rush in and he has this moment of insecurity, and then Midnight is like, no, think of your teammates, of your squad mates, and he's like, yes, and just fucking like absorbs the lightning and charges back the Ampivolt. Like, that's cool. Again, it's kind of like with Shinso. You have this clear through line of development between these characters. I mean, you can even trace it back to the provisional license exam, where he's like, where he really learns to appreciate his friends and to understand that they put their trust in him because they believe he's competent, and that he learns to like really, grow into that role. And obviously Kaminari isn't like a super deep character. He doesn't need to be. He's cool, he's fun, and he has a consistent progress in his character arc that is interesting and satisfying to see. So yeah, like, I really appreciate his presence whenever he pops up, and I'm glad that he has graduated from just being Mineta's less pervy friend.
Well, or just being the one gag of, like, it's another thing of, like, you forget that this used to be the case, but his one gag just used to be that, 1 billion volts, haha, I'm dumb. But now he can, like, control it a little bit. Like, he attacks the beast guy, and he does, like, an up-close shock, but it doesn't take him out. And then he has his little, his point-and-shooter thing that he uses. And I love the to go to the other characters, I love the back and forth of this arc to where like I like the little like lapses in judgment that make sense of like they find like Kaminari didn't notice that he put the thing on the beast guy, and Suyu's like, well, I noticed it, and so they go to track him, and Kaminari's like, oh, here's my plan, we'll do this, and the guy with the like scale shooting power, like the Rin. I really liked him, even though he didn't get much characterization. What I liked about him was that he was like, he's like, hey, dude, isn't that the thing that Kaminari has? And then the Vine girl says, I caught someone. So they're immediately on edge, and they forget that they just noticed that. But as soon as Kaminari goes to attack, he's like, oh, crap, that one thing. And he shoots the little pointer off, or the shooter off of him, and the lightning misses. And I was like, oh, that was so cool that he caught that and made up for his mistake. And so just, I love this little back and forth of like, oh, we'll send Vine over here, and then that'll be a way to trick them. But then whenever Kaminari goes to electrocute the beast guy, the guy with the air blast, he jumps into the air, and Suyu is off screen and grabs her with his tongue. Like there's this great back and forth of every move, someone is reacting to it. Yeah. And so it never feels boring. And especially, like I said, my favorite part is whenever they just got done with Kaminari tried to nuke us with 1 billion volts, and we just survived. And so he's like, all right, Vine, get that stuff back up. And it turns out it was Shinso talking. And I don't know about you, but every time I read that, I'm just like, oh yeah, I forgot Shinso was there. So whenever it goes boom, and it does the shot of her getting brainwashed, you're like, oh my gosh, he got her.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think, I don't know if you remember this, but for the longest time, and probably still now, people tend to say that MHA doesn't have tactical fights. And admittedly, most of them aren't very tactical. Like,
no.
Rarely that is the point. But this arc, every single one of these fights showcases strategy. It showcases prediction. And it showcases, as you said, back and forth, like adaptive strategy. And I like that in every single one of these, their strategies fall apart, and we kind of see them having to deal with that. And I really think that this first fight sets that up really well, right? Where they both have kind of their plan, and it falls apart on both ends, and they both have to kind of deal with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess each round I wanted to ask, like, was there any Class B character that, after this fight, whether you already liked them or not, you were just like, yeah, that guy. For me, it was the Beast guy whenever he comes in, and obviously he's all gung-ho, but then he does, like, he's like, human mode, and he does a little twirl past them, and then he's like, so Beast mode, and then he just tosses them.
Yeah. No, I like him as well. I don't remember his name right now, but... Yeah.
Just call them by their quirks, just like Beast Man, Vine Girl. Like they all have very Japanese names.
Yeah, because like his hero name I think is Gevudan, or something like that. But
yeah.
I like him. Like I like his personality. I like that he gets wild with his beast mode. And one thing that just stuck out to me is his character page that you also get in the volume, obviously, where it's like he is from a well educated and rich family. He also looks up to Hound Dog. I'm like. Yeah, like cool. Like that's all I need on him. So yeah, I really like him. I like Rin. I think he's cool. Like his design is awesome. His quirk is super cool. Like the fucking scales that grow out of his arms.
He's just a Gatling gun with scales, so it's non-lethal.
Yeah, it's cool. Like we said it before, Hori is so good at creating compelling designs and superpowers. Like. I am so happy that he decided to make a superpower shonen because he is so good at designing quirks. Like, the only quirks I genuinely think are lame are either the ones he made lame on purpose or the ones in Vigilantes, which he didn't really make up for the most part. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
Is that round one done? Do you have anyone else?
The only other thing with round one that I'll say is I like that they really do sell that Shinso's presence really manipulated the battle, because after they get tricked the second time, Gevadan refuses to talk and then said he's just pointing, and he's like, dude, just like turn around and talk to me, because he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to get brainwashed. So I really like that the way the fight works is that it's a breakdown of communication, which is so unique for MHA in terms of just how the fight goes, and it's why like I genuinely think that this round is one of my favorite fights in MHA, just because it's so unique in how it how it presents and how it breaks down. Like, it doesn't end up getting to be a brawl because everyone is being psychologically like warped with, because they're like, okay, don't say anything, don't talk, but then I can't see, and oh, this person was talking over here, was this that? And it's just really great. So yeah, it's such a great fight, and it's a great showcase to start off the arc with a bang by being like, you wanted Shinso back? Look at him just being the most useful guy ever. So
yeah. Okay. Round two. That is Momo's fight.
Yep.
Right? Yes.
So Momo, Aoyama, Tokoyami, and Invisible Girl versus Kendo, Manga Guy, Mushroom, and the Dark Quirk.
All right. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll do this one. I really love this round mostly for the Class B characters. I think this is the round that endears me the most to all of them. Like, I think every round, like, I think round 3 has it the closest where, like, I really, like, become, like almost in love with, like, 3 of them. But then, like, the Spiral guy, I'm just like, he's cool. But, like, this round, like, the Manga Guy would have been that character, but he's so stupid and his quirk is so crazy where it's like, ba-bam, skadoosh, and then just like a giant wall appears, and then later he's like, boomy or something like that, and it creates a humidifier, and and then he's like shooting ones that are like bouncy and knocking off people's like, oh, my throat hurts, and then his head says, ow. Like, he's ridiculous. But then just like, I really loved seeing Kendo's like it's like that underdog spirit of her being like, you know what, I know that you're the smart girl in the class, why didn't you go to the beauty pageant? I wanted to show that I was hotter than you. Well, I guess I'll just have to beat you up. And like, that's basically what this whole round is for her to just like feel not more confident in herself, but just to be like, nah, I am that girl. I am cool. And you are not, Momo. So I really like that for her. And Kendo's just always a pleasant presence. But then the two standouts, which I'd say you'd probably agree with, is Mushroom Girl and Kuroroi. Just their personalities and just like this way, this shroom, that shroom, every shroom. Or just like Kuroi doing his goofy little Chunibyo antics of being like dark and edgy, and you have Tokoyami and him finishing each other's sentences in their head, going like, "That's what you thought I'd say, isn't it?" Like, and they just think they're both the coolest thing ever. And to be fair, they are pretty cool. And of course, his crush on the Mushroom Girl, and then just the Mushroom Girl being a devious monster. She's like, well, you know, I guess I have to put mushrooms in your throat. Sorry about that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So just like, I think in general, like the Class B characters really shine in this fight, and of course they should. They win this round. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on them particularly.
Well, my first thing is, did you notice that Kinoko, the Mushroom Girl's design, massively changes between her appearances in the sports festival and here?
Yeah, I think I noticed that too. She's way cuter now.
Yeah, she looks like a completely different person. Like, and you can look that up very easily by just looking at the anime, because her season 2 anime design and her season 5 anime design look like two different characters. Like, straight up. Because I think in the sports festival, he even gives her, like, the bowl cut where you don't see her eyes, and he gives her, like, the Tsuyu pose, where she has, like, her hands in front of her, like, you know, a velociraptor or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's so bizarre, but her new design, she is, like, one of the few characters in MHA, like, one of the few girl characters, aside from, like, the adult women, where I'm like, she's cute. I like her. I like seeing her. I think Hori did a very good job at designing her. I think her costume is awesome. I think her quirk is incredible. Like,
yeah,
you wouldn't think that being able to grow mushrooms is such a powerful quirk. But once you get to the point that, oh no, they can grow anywhere that's humid and in range, including your throat, it's like, oh no.
Oh no.
Also, I don't know if you caught that. I love the detail that she specifically grows a species of mushroom that is completely black for Kuroro to enter. That is so cool.
And not only that, like, she eventually makes like a line of it so that he can move around too.
Yeah. That is so awesome. And again, I wonder if that influences his crush on her, because I mean, it seems pretty one-sided. I don't think Kinoko is at all aware of it.
No.
It's interesting because she looks like that, like, tiny girl who wouldn't really be very social, but the way she talks with people and the way Kuroro interacts with her, you kind of get the feeling that she's kind of just a generally social person. Maybe even
I like
flirty.
when she goes to Tokoyami and she's like, "Sorry about that, Tokoyami. It wasn't very cute of me. Do you need a throat lozenge?" He's like, "Don't give me your pity."
Yeah, it's awesome. And Kuroyoro's quirk is another one of those where I'm like, I would watch a series about this guy. Like, that is so versatile and so cool. Like, him taking over Dark Shadow is one of the hypest moments in this arc.
I'm gonna wear you like a suit. I was like, oh no.
It's so awesome. And also, again, his design is just cool. And his name, Vanta Black. Like, yes, Hori, please.
Yes. And he's so edgy and funny. Like, yeah.
Another standout character for me this fight, though, is Tokoyami. Like, I think...
so moving to Class A. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think too much of Kendo. Like, she kind of just reestablishes what I already thought of her.
Yeah.
Didn't feel too much to it. Manga Fukidashi is the funniest character in MHA on concept alone, because he's called Manga and his ability is onomatopoeias, which I'm like, okay, that is certainly a thing to do.
And they become brick walls that he can shoot at you.
Yeah, and it's just
ridiculous.
Cool. Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
His face is a manga page.
Yeah, and it like changed, like the backside of it is a word bubble that changes based on what he says.
It's so dumb, but it's so
like
cool.
There's like a part where he says like, "Ow, my throat hurts" out loud, and then on internally he says, "Ow, that really hurts," and then on his head it says "Ow." Like on the same page.
Yeah, but to get to Tokoyami, I think little bits like these, like little morsels that we get with him and his internship with Hawks, is why I think Tokoyami and a lot of Class A are way cooler characters than you might think at first. Because, like, we don't get to see much of Tokoyami. He doesn't even have a backstory or whatever, but just his demeanor and the way he feels about his relationship to Hawks already sells him as such a cool character. Where he's like, I came here to learn, not to be your carrier pigeon or whatever. But then he grows to respect Hawks, which of course leads also into like their connection during the war arc, which I think is great. And
Hawks, it's like we've become the wind.
Yeah, like I will say
his anime voice definitely helps reading.
Yeah. But one thing I will also say is I fully buy into his shtick, because holy shit, he's so cool. Like, obviously
he's so cool.
Yeah, obviously he's so cringy. But Fallen Black Angel, when he learns to fly, and like Dark Ankh Sabbath, like, oh, I'm here for it. Because it's like it's not played like seriously. It's very much a gag, but it's done with just enough swag where you can accept it and be like, yeah, this is cringy, but it's also really cool. So
yeah,
like,
it's that perfect middle ground, because he comes in and he's like, "That's what you were thinking," and then he flies, and then all the class people are like, "He's flying," and that's the moment where it's like, all right, if we go too far, but then it immediately shows the little diagram of like, Dark Shadow is floating, so he can just like wrap his arms around him, and they're floating. Go get him, Dark Shadow.
Yeah, I also like that the cape now actually has a proper use, where it's like
a
before,
purpose. Yeah,
before it was just like, oh, I look cool, but now it's like, yeah, so Dark Shadow can perpetually be shrouded in darkness, and I think that that's really cool. And it of course also comes back to his ultimate move, Ragnarok, which he then uses in the war arc, where he has like Dark Shadow hidden under his cape for a long time to absorb darkness, and then he shoots him out in his berserk state, which I reread that chapter just after this reread, just to kind of get a feel on Tokoyami, and that's such a cool move. And it kind of naturally evolves from him learning how to use Dark Shadow more efficiently with his cape. And it kind of goes back to how cool quirks are, because they're these very simple powers on the surface that if you just think about them a little bit, you can get some pretty cool utility out of them, and the characters regularly do. So yeah, Tokoyami, MVP for me this fight, together with Koroiro and Kinoko.
Yeah, with Tokoyami, I just wanted to say that I think he's Horikoshi's best usage of like the side cast of like MHA to where like he's like C tier level of relevance, where like you said, he doesn't have a backstory, he doesn't really even have like an arc or anything like that. He has a connection to an important character, which keeps him from being like your Koda or your Hagakure. But like what I really like about him is that he's always power progressing. Like you can always track that. So like it's so cool to see him. Like I love the fact that when he's first chasing after Hawks, it's when he's just on foot, and that was during the Stain arc, right? And he even I think they even said during that arc, like he's like, I didn't learn anything, and they even mentioned the same city, which if that was planned, like we don't know, but like obviously you can just go back and be like, all right, where did he go? What did he say? All right, we can line that up. But what I really love is that when he gets better, it took place after Provisional License, where he came up with the Dark Shadow cloak. And so you actually get to be like, oh, that was when he came up with that. That's so cool. And that's why he's better. It's not just like, and then I got better. Like, we actually saw that. And so to see him get to this point and just constantly be so competent, combined with a cool design, a really cool voice in like both versions, like you're just like, it's like we said in the war arc, you do you, Birdman. And it's just always fun to check up on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in general, I think he is such a wonderful blend of a goofy design that, thanks to Horikoshi's like art style and the way he frames him, manages to work really well, because he really is just a Birdman. But panels where he's like charging up Dark Shadow and like doing his dumb poses always just get to me. Like I really like him. Yeah, like.
And then the second person I wanted to talk about, because I don't really have anything to say about Aoyama or Hagakure. Aoyama, I do like the use of his quirk, where it's not just like shoot a bunch of light, it's like shoot a bunch of light everywhere with his navel laser, because if Kurore is shifting through, we're constantly changing the shadow so he doesn't have anything to attach to. Because if you were just doing like one block of area, he could just avoid it, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a cool use, but that was more on Momo, who I want to talk about, where I really love Momo in this fight, where I love how I'd never really like paid too much of attention to it, but I like how just sweet and kind Momo is. Like, she's the rich girl character, but she's always like, oh, friends are gonna come to my house, this is the best thing ever. Or she's like, oh, I'm really sorry, guys, like I didn't think my ginormous bed would fit into the tiny closet size space, that's my bad. And she's not trying to be like snarky or anything about it, like, because you can do that character where it's just like, oh, it's not even as big as my closet. But like, she's just so sweet and kind. So I love that in this fight we get to see her confidence come back in, but also I love her plan. I love that her plan involves aim a gun at a girl with just big hands and then make her go, wait, no way, she's not gonna shoot me point blank with a cannonball. The wall, she's gonna shoot the wall? Oh god. And then she's like, sorry for startling you, and that gives her the chance to set up her attack to not only help her teammates, because she could have just fought for herself, but she ended up coming up with a way to not only win her fight, but also help all of her teammates by making Tokiyami his thing, the disinfectant, so she's thinking ahead. But then also, my favorite part is, okay, I can't beat up Kendo because she's really strong, so I'm just gonna attach you to my giant cannon, and you just have to lug me around, idiot. And like, the rest of the fight is just, she's just walking around with a giant cannon strapped to her. And I'm like, that's just such a good plan. And the only reason it didn't work is, like Monoma said, he should have just knocked out Kurore because, or Kinoko, because her power is just so OP and no one could have predicted that she could do that. But Momo's plan would have worked. And I just think it was really nice that at the end of the fight, Kendo's like, man, even when I had my two-prong plan, she just came up with a plan at the last second that, like, it really just doesn't feel like I defeated her. It feels like we just scraped by. And I think that's great. I know at the time a lot of people memed on Momo of like, oh my gosh, she's just never going to win anything. How long is she going to suck? But especially with the war arc now in context, and also just, I think the fight in general, the fact that this is a training arc makes that loss, it doesn't make Momo feel like a loser to me. By the end of it, I was like, man, when you see her like knocked out and she's just strapped to the cannon and she just looks so peaceful, like she doesn't look like she has any regrets, which we find out later, what's his face, the Honanuki, he's like, unlike Momo, I can't leave anything with my comrades and I don't want to have any regrets, so he pushes himself. I like that Momo loses the fight, but she loses in style and in composure. So I just really like her this fight. So
yeah, I mean, Momo is awesome. I really hope Hori does a lot more with her, because I feel like her character can go a lot of cool ways. Because of course, her whole thing of she is the other recommendation student, and therefore she's always in a comparison with Todoroki, even extra diegetically. So the fact that like meta comparison is a part of her characterization, I always felt was a cool thing. So this arc kind of follows up on that, and the war follows up on that. So I definitely hope that we get more of that.
That completes it. We shouldn't do this anymore. We shouldn't have any more of like, oh, is Momo a good leader? Like from now on, she should just be a good leader, and we can delve more into her as a character, I feel.
Yes.
Like that's what I want. Like if we do this again, then it's bad, I feel like.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because we've capitalized on it, right? With like obviously she can feel like, oh, I didn't do anything because people still died. Like, you know, Gigantomachia, maybe she could have done a bigger dose or whatever. But what I really don't want to see is like we give her another fight, she loses, and it's like, oh, am I really a good leader? And then she gets another fight and she does win. Like Momo is at a point in her character to where I think she's just one rung above Tokoyami, who can just be like power progression and he has a connection to a character. I feel like Momo, unless you're going to really delve into her relationship to Todoroki, like friends or otherwise, or her relationship to her classmate, you can't do the power progression anymore because it was based off her confidence and her competency, which I think we've reached peak efficiency. Like she should just be that now. So.
Yes. I mean, the confidence she had in this fight already should be enough. And honestly, the only way I can see that topic coming back is now because with the war arc, this is the first time she has seen real combat. And, you know, the first time we've seen her character progression within that real combat. And I do think, you know, Midnight's death probably set her back a bit, but I want to see a bit of grit. You know, I want to see her being like, I'm not letting this happen again. I am gonna be a good leader from now on. And her to really take that to heart. Like, I think
or the time... Yeah. Just like take that to heart what Midnight said. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so my last thing on this fight, if you don't have anything to say, my finishing thought is the thought of Hagakure being there naked and having mushrooms grow all over her body makes my skin itch. Like, when she said like, oh no, they're revealing my curves, I was like, oh no, you should not have said that, because now I'm about to vomit. Like,
yeah. I'd say if there's any flaw with this fight, it would just be that, to be fair, it might not have made sense regardless, which is that they don't use Hagakure's light abilities at all. Like, she can create a beam, or not a beam, but like a big blast. But I also understand like the point I brought up earlier where it's like, well, if you do that, you're just getting one area. And the point was to have Aoyama hit everything. So
yeah, exactly.
You know, but it's just like, Invisible Girl continues to be worthless. Nothing new.
Yeah, Hagakure might be the least utilized character in the entire show.
Like, the moment I knew that she was the least utilized was when the first movie had the joke of her using rock, paper, scissors signs, and I laughed harder than any joke they've ever done with Invisible Girl, and Invisible Girl's point is to be a joke character. I'm like, all right, Hori, you gotta step it up.
yeah, like, she feels like such a filler. She's the only character I genuinely feel like shouldn't exist because Hori has done nothing with her. Like, she's genuinely a nothing character, and I feel like that is a big shame. Yeah. I also think that, honestly, the whole joke with, oh, she's always naked has kind of reached a saturation point where I'm like, is she always going to be like this? Because that's kind of lame.
It was the fear for Kaminari, right? Like, the joke is, oh, he go dumb.
Yeah. It's like, Hagakure needs to do something. Like, if she does end up being the traitor, that's lame, but at the very least, it will be something for her to do. Yeah. All right. Next fight. Number 3. Do I want to go?
Yeah, you go, because I did the last one, so we'll just bounce back.
Okay. Todoroki versus Tetsu is a top 1 encounter. I'm just going to throw that one out. That is... Todoroki being like, all right, if ice doesn't work, I'm just going to fry you and force you to go away. Because, like, that's how he uses fire. He uses it as, like, a way to control the environment. That the ice is the actual attack most of the time. The fire, like, one thing you notice with Todoroki is that he only, up until the joint training out, he mostly uses fire as a way to keep people away from him. Whereas
or, like, guide them.
Yeah. Whereas the ice is the actual attack. And so he uses fire against Tetsu, and Tetsu is like, you didn't think that was going to work, did ya? I have trained to a point where I'm immune against everything you can dish out. And just them fighting while Todoroki's continuously, like, using his flames is awesome. Like, I think it's incredible that does not get more people talking about it. Again, it's probably because of the botched reception this arc got. But holy shit, them fighting in like a pit of flames while like the Tetsu's skin is melting and recovering,
and he just doesn't stop talking.
Yeah, and Shoto's like fucking pushing at his limits and everything and frying the cameras. Like, that is so cool. That is so cool. And again, I think that's also where Hori's art really goes fucking crazy, where he just like starts going completely mental with like the cross hatching and, as you said, the simulated heat distortion. It's so cool.
And the spread of Tetsu coming out, like you turn the page and he's like, let me tell you. He's like, he goes, do you have any idea why I decided to attack you? You turn the page and it's a spread, 'cause your stuff doesn't work on me. And then he rushes at him, and Todoroki, you can see the fear in his eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, the fact that the volume cover colors Tetsu as like this red hot glowing like body of magma is so cool. Like, and the fact that we're getting that scene animated by Yutaka Nakamura, whoo boy,
I can't wait.
I cannot wait. Like, so good, so good. Like,
and it's not like a power scaling thing. It's just so cool. Like, I'm all for beating down my favorite characters in MHA because that's how they grow. But Todoroki just being so overpowered, and like he doesn't get nerfed at all this fight. He has full reign to use his powers, and to just see him over and over just get curb stomped by Tetsu, or just like being a nuisance, like yelling at him and all this stuff. And Todoroki's like, "Will you ever shut up?" And like the fact that I don't care if this is a mistranslation, this is my version of Tetsu. In the volume version, he attacks Todoroki with an attack called My Fist, and it's just a punch to the stomach. It's the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, and honestly, one thing I like about this arc is that this is the arc, and this fight is the fight where Todoroki really learns the limits of just relying on big blasts. Which is a lesson he thinks he has already learned. Because when he does his Ice Blast this fight, he specifically leaves a hole for him to see. He doesn't completely wall himself off, which goes back to what Stain said to him during their fight, where he's like, oh, using attacks that obstruct your vision, pretty stupid. And so he learns from this. But this is the arc where he learns, fuck, I can't just keep shooting out all of my power. I need techniques. Which, you know, wonderfully segues into the Endeavor Agency arc, because this arc, of course, Todoroki ends it with texting Endeavor, hey dad, how about you teach me that flash fire fist?
Yes.
Yeah, which is actually the first named technique Todoroki learns, right? Because before
because he has the flash fire freeze where he nukes the stadium, but he does that in a miniature version against the cider house gang, like the soda guys, where he's like, I gotta end this quick, and so the ice is already surrounding them. This is before MVA, and he just shoots fire really big, and it says flash fire heat wave or whatever, and it's basically just like a screen nuke, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And he learned that after he decided to use that more after this fight, which is what goes to what you said.
Yeah, like he learns how more to rely on technical abilities over just overpowering the enemy with, you know, just shooting flames everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely like that this progresses Todoroki's character and, you know, gives us a really, really cool fight in the process. I also, we talked about this before, I also really love Hananuki in this fight. I think, like, his presence is so cool. And I like Pony, too. Like,
I love Pony. Thank goodness. I'm glad you like Pony.
Yeah, like, she has such a weird design, but it's just cool to see her use her powers. And the only thing I really hate about her is her feet. They make my skin crawl. Why do they look like that?
I just like how sweet she is. Like whenever Tetsu's doing his thing, and she's like, "Fight on, Tetsu!" But I think in the original, like, because they just kind of translate it so we would understand it better. But I think she says like, "Fight on, Shin Tetsu," which is like referring to like a chimney or like a stove. So, so it's like, "Fight on, Shin Tetsu." And then later, whenever she's like I like that because Ida is one of the only characters who gets into the like, oh, it's heroes versus villains, right? So I'm gonna be the hero, you know, I'm gonna play the character. She's like the only other person who does that because she's like, sorry, Tentacle, but I always trot past the octopus at the aquarium. They're creepy. Like, she's just so cute. Like, I don't know, she's just fun. I like that. To not to go too off topic, but I actually like that in round 1, 2, 3, and 4, the like the female cast actually make a lot of like the deciding decisions for the fight, like the way it goes. Like Tsuyu really guides the entire action in her fight. The second one is ruled by Kendo, who came up with the plan, and then Kiniko, who finishes it. And then this round is solved by Pony being like, nope, I've analyzed the situation. If we can't win, we are certainly not going to lose. And she gets it to where they both get the point. So I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah. I like the back and forth here. One thing I really liked on this reread is seeing Ida train his engines by ripping them out. That is really metal. Yeah, and it makes it felt like a good. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, it makes me wish we saw Ida more after this. Like,
well, that's why another reason I appreciate this arc is that, again, if this had happened at the beginning of the series, it would feel like a Chunin exam thing where it's like, man, what happened to all those great characters I love? But I appreciate that this is, if it's a love letter, this is like, hey guys, I know Ida hasn't really done anything, so you know what? This is going to be his fight to like be really cool, like he's got this turbo thing, and it also kind of gives you a meta reason of like, why hasn't Ida done anything? It's like, he's been ripping out his legs, dude, and getting jacked. So... And when he just like I love the shot of him kicking Honanuki twice, and Honanuki's like character, like the drawing, he's going like ugh, and then he's also getting kicked the other way too. Like he was getting hit so fast, and then later he gets his face smashed, and it's just like it's this really quick shot of Ida just going past and hitting his face. And also Ida takes out one of the guys, and I love the part where he gives like two speech bubbles worth of instructions, but if he's moving that fast, how is he saying all that? And Ojiro is like, man, you've learned to talk faster too, Ida.
Yeah, no, I really think Ida showed up really well in this arc, and again, the thing with Ida is he's kind of like Uraraka to me. I like him, I just wish there was more. Right? I just wish there was more, and that there was more consistently. And unfortunately, just like Uraraka, Ida has not really performed very well in the arcs after this, which is a damn shame. Because
I would say, it's a real shame because like I said, like I was really disappointed because I wanted Ida back, but he, as we saw in our war arc conversation, he was at the bottom. But what I always say with Ida is why I mostly defend him is that he is just unfortunately in this position where he finished his character arc so soon. And then all he can really do at this point is just like continue that on unless he gets a new dynamic, which would have to involve some outer source because he continues to be support for Deku. He continues to have even an extension of his arc from Stain during the Kamino arc. So we immediately, like, if you were like, okay, he can like learn to have a different dynamic with Deku. Well, we already did that immediately afterwards. So, Ida's just kind of in this unfortunate position where he got a complete arc, he got all this focus, and then it was like, next, Kirishima, get up here.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of now that Stain is out of the prison, maybe something can happen there. Like,
and also, Deku's gonna need his friends, and I really, I would really like all of them to step up in some way and have a conversation with him, and I think that's warranted, especially based on what Ida had to say last time. He was afraid this would happen, right? He was afraid that if Deku continued the way he did with Muscular, that because he sees him like a brother, he's like, I don't want you to be like my brother who's crippled, and that's where Deku's not looking so hot, at least in the one of his arms. So I think there's room for Ida to return. And if not, I always have heroes or two heroes where he beats the crap out of Chimera. So
and I mean, one thing I do like about Ida is that his friendship to Deku is maybe one of the nicest dynamics in Class A, because they really feel like an established friendship, right? Like they have had so many things happen between them. Like, they went from really disliking each other to start to being, happy acquaintances, to being really close friends after the Stain arc, to being so close that Ida, does the friends thing where you beat the shit out of someone for just being stupid. And then they have the moment where, like, Deku's, like, holding back himself from feeling properly, and Ida's like, hey, it's okay to cry. It's like, it feels like a real friendship, and I love that. Like, in general, I think MHA handles friendships more realistically than most other series I've seen. Like, there's a genuine back and forth that isn't, like, overly sweet or overly cynical. It's just, hey, I care about you in my own way. And, that care comes in multiple different forms. And I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Like, it's the same with Todoroki. Like, Todoroki is the most unemotional character in this show, probably. Like, he doesn't get a lot of very emotional scenes outside of, like, where he realizes his brother is alive and wants to kill him. But even then,
that might make you a bit emotional.
Exactly. But even then, he feels like someone who cares about Deku. He comes up to Deku after this arc and he's like, hey, kind of weird that you have 2 quirks, but now we can bond over this. And Deku's like, I appreciate it, but sorry, it's only 1 quirk. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to assume. It's like...
Yeah, the fact that he apologizes and then he says, oh, but it was really impressive.
Yeah, and that's kind of the fuzziness that I have with MHA. These people feel like they care for each other, right? There's so many friendships in Shonen that are friendships in name only, where it's like, yeah, we're friends, but we, like, cooperate in fights twice.
So you mean, like, they only feel like friends insofar as they fight next to each other and they are not negative towards each other, so therefore they are friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the word friend, I think, in anime in general gets thrown out so much, you kind of get desensitized to what it really means. To the point where it's really just like, I have convinced you to join my cause. You're my friend. Whereas in MHA, and specifically in the dynamics around Deku, you really get this feel that these people enjoy being around each other. They enjoy being, part of the same group. One of my favorite things is the fact that Bakugo has his own separate friend group, separate from Deku's. Right?
Yeah.
It would have been so easy to, after their kerfuffle, after a provisional exam, to integrate Bakugo into their group. But no, Bakugo still has his idiot squad, right? Kaminari and Kirishima and Sero. And it's like, that's cool, because it tells us that these people have preferences, that these people have dynamics beyond just what we can tell from a character profile. And I really think MHA does that well, and I think it extends to the League of Villains, who also feel like people who, despite their demeanor and their craziness, care about each other, right? Like Spinner. He is such a dumb weirdo, but he cares, and you can tell. Same with Compress, and Toga, and Twice especially. Jesus Christ, Twice cares, right? And even Shigaraki, even though he never comes out and says, hey, buddies, like, you're my nakama, you're my tomodachi desu, yo. But it's like, hey, this, during the overall arc, for example, like, this isn't just for me, this is for all of us. I'm not going to give you orders, just do what you feel like doing, but remember,
I believe in you.
Yeah, I believe in you, right? And it's just such a cool thing. Like, I love that. And I really hope that this continues on, even as we get into, like, the big, city busting fights.
Yeah, and I would say it's still, I think we're definitely in for that, because one of my favorite things of the hospital section we were into is just that it's a little thing, like, no one really brings attention to it, but, like, when they're all talking to Shoto, you just see, like, Mina's crying, and from panel to panel you see her get close to Momo, to where, like, Momo's putting her head on her head to, like, comfort her and hug her and make sure she's okay, and that just made me like Momo even more. That she's just, like, you can see that she's been crying and all this stuff, but she's trying to hold it together for her other classmates, and it's just something as simple as Mina's like, everything's gonna be okay, and you just see her reach out, next panel she's closer, next panel she's hugging her.
Yeah, like, that's the thing, right? MHA, fundamentally, is a school series, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes. But when you write a series about a class, you have to make sure that you nail what I like to call the class dynamic. The specific rhythm of interpersonal relationships that forms in educational facilities. And, I might sound like a weirdo, but I genuinely believe the relationships you form in school are very different from the ones you form, like, at work or in your extracurricular activities. because of that element of, being forced into a class and having to get along, even if you don't want to with some of these people, right? And nailing that feeling is something that I've only ever seen 2 Shonen Jump series nail, and that's My Hero and Assassination Classroom. And they both do it in different ways, and MHA does it while also being a superpower battle shonen, and I respect the hell out of that. That's also why I kind of don't think Class A is too big anymore. I used to think that, but now the more I consider it, the more I think Class A is a good size, because you get your friend groups, you get a bit of diversity between the dynamics, and you get the weird characters you don't like, but that other people seem to have at least cordial relationships with. Like, the fact everyone has kind of acclimated to Mineta is kind of awesome. And the fact that Mineta has toned down is also kind of awesome, although I suspect that is not necessarily a character decision, that is a Hori realizing that he went too far decision.
Yeah, because I sent this to you one time. There was like an interview where, I don't know if it was an interview or just like someone questioned, but he was like, yeah, I probably need to do something about Mineta.
Yeah. Cause...
And you can tell that what he did was, in this arc, he has him do like a pervy thing to Mina, like making it to where he'll like land on her boobs. And just in the background of the Aftermath chapter, he's literally being Clockwork Oranged.
Yeah.
Where he's strapped to a chair, has his eyes peeled open, he's in a straitjacket, and he's screaming, and Mina's just got her arms crossed watching a TV with him. It's like, I don't know, since then he hasn't done anything, so maybe it worked.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, probably the big thing that caused this change is what he says to Eri, right? When he's like, oh, call me in 10 years when you're hot. I think even
maybe
even in Japan, I think they realized that was too much, because
the joke is that it's supposed to be like it's that absurdist humor of like, oh my gosh, he said that, but we already don't like Mineta, so it's just not funny. It's the joke I always compare it to is when Bender in Futurama, Bender opens the door and there's like a doorbell baby, but it's actually just like a card that's crying under it, and he comes out, and you don't know this, and he starts stepping on it, and he's crushing and it's crying, and so they come outside and they're like, Bender, it's a baby, and he's still stepping on it. He goes, a baby what? And then they hit him with a baseball bat, and then it's like, oh, it's not a baby, but it's like supposed to be like this ridiculous thing of like, the robot's stepping on a baby, what's he doing? And his only question is, a baby what? As if that would change anything. And so it's supposed to be like this ridiculous, and it's Futurama, so it's a comedy anyway. It's not gonna be, he's not actually gonna be stepping on a baby. But like, I think that's what they were going for, is like, oh my gosh, Mineta, are you that pervy? But it just didn't come across well.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because suspiciously, Mineta gets way better after that. Like, I can't think of many more times where he does anything after that. Like, the only one I can think of is this arc. Yeah, the one in this arc. But anyway, do we want to move on to the 4th round?
Yeah, the last thing I just was going to say is that, speaking of little character moments, I just like that Deku, whenever Ida finishes his thing, like you brought up earlier, they feel like genuine friends. We have Uraraka, who's like, poor Ida, he's going to feel so bad. And then Deku just, like, this is how the page ends, is just like, yeah, but he was awesome out there. And I'm just like, yeah. Like, it just feels nice. And also Todoroki and Ida are friends too. Like, they did the little put your face in the hole at the culture festival thing. They're bros. And I just like their little conversation in the hospital. And Tetsu being like, he literally has a Snickers, and he's like, hey, Todoroki, I'm counting this as a loss. Don't question me. We're going to fight again sometime. See ya. And he just leaves.
Yeah, I also like that when Honenuki is like, let's fight again, both Ida and Todoroki enthusiastically say yes.
Yeah, like, they're both happy about it. And like, that just shows how far like Todoroki's come too, and that he's able to just like, he's not just like frowny boy, but whenever it's really emotional, he'll crack a smirk. Like, no, he can genuinely have a good time and talk to people. He's just quieter about it. So
like, it feels genuine, warm, and it feels like these people actually like each other. That's my lunchbox quote for this one. They like each other, and that's good.
Yeah. Speaking of people who don't like each other, we have Bakugo, who hates everyone, but actually he thinks you're the coolest. So we have the we have the Bakugo round, which is just a curb stomp. Is the point of it? It it really does come off as like the Bakugo, let's like just praise him, because you even have characters be like, what? He went through character development? Like, it feels like Horikoshi's like, all right, apparently people still don't get it. So, and so let me hammer it in that Bakugo has changed. He's become better. He's willing to work with people. But what I like about it, because I was thinking about this, I'm like, yeah, but he still like yells at them, calls them minions, and he's not like listening to their plan. But what I like about it is that this actually kind of shows Bakugo as he's continuing to be the leader type that he wants to be, which makes sense for someone of his power. But what I like is that he's not a leader in the sense of the way he was at the sports festival, where at the sports festival, it was like, okay, is Bakugo willing to not swallow his pride, but just willing to be smart enough to know, oh, I can't just blow up Monoma. I have to use all the people around me. And so he makes the slide and blah, blah, blah. In this, he specifically makes it a point that no, it's not that I'm going to win and you're all going to be useful. It's that we are going to win. And if you guys fall behind, I will come back. I will rush back and help you until we are all running again. And I really like that. I love the fact that whenever he saves all of them the first time, it's when he's getting punched in the face by like Tokage's quirk and like getting hit in the side. And he just he just knows where they are and he just shoots his hand and he's not even looking at him, but he's just like, bam, and he shoots and saves them. And then he rushes back to protect them. And he's like, all right, let's keep going. And I just really love how it's not that Bakugo's necessarily changed in that, oh, he's now warm and fuzzy, or that even really that you could even say that he really likes his class. I think he does like them. We've seen that, obviously. Culture Festival proves this. But just the fact that he believes that there is value and strength, as he says, winning through saving and saving through winning, I now have both. And the fact that he says, like, the strong settle for nothing less, and we are the strong. And that hypes up his class to not only protect him, but him protect them. Once they start getting in sync, it just flows perfectly. And it really feels like it, too. Like, there comes a point where Jiro's like, go over there. Or, like, Sero just has his own plan, completely separate from Bakugo, where he's like, okay, so logically she's been using this amount of her body parts, so that probably means this, this, and this. Therefore, we can attach a tape to it that will put the bomb, and then therefore that'll let Bakugo know where they're at. And he doesn't tell Bakugo this, he just does it, and then Bakugo responds. And it's just great. Like, you genuinely feel like, yeah, Bakugo's grown, and it also just hypes everyone else up because there is a section where Bakugo gets captured, and they save him, and it feels really cool. So I really love it.
Yeah, like, Bakugo is such a wonderful character. Like, he is kind of like Deku, but more obvious in his growth. Still not obvious enough for some people, but I really love how warm he feels this arc. Like, despite that he's still yelling, his actions speak of someone who, like, acknowledges that he is not the only guy who is the shit. Like, he cares for his class to the extent where he will save them, and he really took the words that All Might spoke to him to heart. And I just gain so much respect every time I see Bakugo do that. I also think Monoma's panel where he's like, don't tell me he's gotten character development is so funny.
Yeah.
Like, every time MHA breaks the fourth wall, it's so good. And I think this is really adequate and really well structured. And I like that, we have one fight that is really just a complete wash. That we really just have one fight go by really quickly. Because that is, we mentioned it before, like, this arc is kind of long. So when this fight was as short as it was, I really did appreciate it. And it works perfectly. It speaks to the strengths of the characters. It speaks to the strengths of the strategies they come up with. And that is cool. I also... as I said, I also think Tokage is such a funny character because she comes out of nowhere, gets introduced as the shit, does a few couple of cool things, and then gets fucking point blank blasted by Bakugo.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And then he literally hunches over with his, like, demon back because the metal's still welded onto him, and he's like, and then he literally says, like, I'm gonna be a hero. Da-da-da. Like, it's like, yeah, okay.
It is so good. I also... Again, I like how much trust he has in his classmates this arc. And I also like how much, like, Deku seems to enjoy just seeing Bakugo be himself. Like, you get, like, Deku being like, yeah, he's doing this. And it's like, yes, Deku, he is doing this. Let's go. So, yeah. I really enjoy this fight. It's very short. It's very to the point. And I think that's exactly the kind of fight Bakugo deserved. I also think... The fact that All Might, when All Might says, "Oh, you were so fast, I almost didn't see you," that was excellent. Bakugo's like, get your eyes checked. But you can see the slightest hint of a smile under his like collar. That is so cool.
That was
so
nice.
cool.
And I just like how he hypes up his team and just things like that. Like I like that he legitimately had a moment where he saw that the guy with the welding power did beat him. Because I went back and checked. I was like, could Bakugo just like blow up the walls? And I was like, no, because it was when he was coming through, he got stuck between these two pillars. So like if he did explosions, it wouldn't do anything. So I like that he got beat by that guy. And then when he came around, he wasn't like, but this time I won't get caught. He's like, this guy's clearly going to go for me again. All right, I'll leave it to these guys. And he it's literally like he says like, you know, and if I need help, you save me. And like the fact that he is willing to say that someone could save him is a pretty big deal. So and like you said, I appreciate that Class B, they would have done well if not for their one mistake, because their plan actually was really good. Like it was coming together really nicely. And then there was like, oh crap, like the escort mission was to escort a tank, and the tank's firing back. Oh god. So
and in general, one thing I appreciate with MHA and this joint training arc especially is that none of the developments these characters go through are like so big and framed in a way where you could immediately pinpoint it as, there is my character development. They're all low key where you almost miss them, but then you compare them to previous parts of the story, especially if there's like a parallelism, and you're like, oh my god, these people have grown, and they've grown so much. And in Bakugo's case, you know, you compare this to the cavalry battle in the sports festival. And, you know, both times he wins, but it's a completely different attitude that he shows there. But the sports festival one still holds the seeds to what eventually blossoms in the joint training arc. Because in the sports festival, he still chooses to rely that, you know, Sero and Mina and Kirishima are going to catch him. And here, it fully blossoms into, I'm just going to do my thing, and I'm going to help you when you need it, and you, in turn, are going to help me when I need it. And together, we will achieve absolute victory. And I think that is just a wonderful direction for his character to go. But yeah, I think that's all my thoughts on this. Are you ready for the big one?
Yeah, the final one, which thankfully we actually don't have to talk too much about because we covered Shinso, we covered Deku and the Vestiges, so really, we can just kind of talk about the other characters. So I'll let you take this one. Okay,
let me start with Uraraka, because she's my eternal thorn. I really like her in this fight. I really think the characterization she gains in this fight, while it doesn't connect to her previous characterization as well as I would have liked, I think it's cool. I think the idea of her kind of being intrinsically tied to wanting to see people happy because her parents have always looked exhausted because, of course, they're poor and working hard, I think that's really sweet. I think it goes a long way in making her more likable and more enjoyable. And I also like that, she immediately jumps in to save Deku. I like that, she completely throws the match almost. She's like, yeah, no, we need to save Deku. Shinso, I know you're the enemy. Fucking help us. Like, brainwash him. Let's go.
Yeah.
And I think that's super cool and super sweet. I also like that and this is like a smaller thing, I like when Black Whip is exploding. Whenever Uraraka tries to reach Deku, her speech bubbles get partially covered by the Black Whip.
Yes, that was so cool.
Yeah, that is so cool. That is like really cool formal storytelling. I already talked about how much I like Negi Shota. I think his entire deal is so cool, from quirk to design to demeanor. Awesome. I like Mineta and Mina. I think what they do in this arc is fun and cool. In general, I always enjoy seeing Mina do things because I think her quirk and her personality are just very enjoyable to watch. And Monoma is awesome. Whenever Monoma says something that isn't just haha class A bad, it's so interesting because his perspective on quirks and his perspective on like the hierarchy of the world is kind of unique, because obviously he has the power to choose any quirk he wants, but he has mastery over none. And so he gets this unique perspective where it's like, I have an on paper really overpowered ability, but I have to work really hard to make it work. And I'm always in the shadow.
I have to rely on others. I'll never be a hero of my own making.
Yeah, exactly. And I just like that. I think Monoma is a cool character because of that dynamic. I also really like when he copies One for All and Deku doesn't even try to fight it. He's just like, dude, no, don't use it.
And he's like, you're too late. And he even like, I didn't notice this at first, but he gets the full cowling effect. And I just love that. Like, what I love about Monoma is that he perfectly, like, Hori goes full ham on this idea of, like, Class B are the no-name side characters. And I just love the way that, like, he has this moment where he's like, well, you know, there was nothing we could do about Bakugo. That's just is what it is. We are the side characters of more great people's lives. Like he sees himself as a side character. And so I love the fact of he's like, I don't begrudge what I have. Sure, I have to do, maybe I have to be a bit more slimy or schemy. But I don't hate the gift I've been given because it creates moments like this where the side character gets to upstage the main lead, and he's just so happy to just finally be able to do something because he touched, Deku, who is the main character, but also in this round was the main threat. And so you just feel so bad for him when it doesn't work out. He's like, I drew a blank. Like, I love his meta perspective of just, he's the perfect embodiment of what Class B is, which is this side character that is desperately struggling and clawing at the idea of trying to get some sort of spotlight. And and just to, I don't know, like, by the end, I'm just like, man, this is why I always liked Monoma, just because I thought he was funny. But I really love that he immediately parallels himself with Shinso, and he's kind of like, it's like Shinso, like, you can just be scummy if you want. Like, I still want to be a hero. Like, because Shinso, like, kind of feels bad when he's like, no, we're not, like, I'm not going to do bad things. He's like, well, how'd you get, Midoriya to listen to? He's like, well, I insulted his friend and blah, blah, blah. He's like, see, it's not a big deal. We got to do what we got to do,
Yeah.
And then, of course, the bitch slap, which is just really funny. That he touches Deku so lightly that he didn't even feel it. And he's just like, twin impact, bang. He's like, I hope I did something for you. I tried. And then I love that when they lose, you see, because they always show everybody when they lose. And they show Monoma, and he's just smiling, and he's like, well, I guess we'll do it better next time.
Yeah, like, it kind of goes to show that the heroic spirit is not limited to people like All Might, who are virtuous and justice-seeking in all aspects of life. It manifests itself in people who have to kind of cope with things, who kind of have to deal with their power being not super reliable. And I really love that. It's I've said this before. I think the theme of heroism and how it manifests in different people is one thing that My Hero does really well. Like, that's why, for example, like Krust's send-off, like in just 2 panels, Hori's like, okay, not everyone is a big, well-known hero, but they all have the spirit. And if you have the spirit, you can become a hero, because then you have the spirit to work hard to become it. And Monoma is just another vestige of that, and I think that that's really, really awesome. I also love his costume, and I also love his name. Phantom Thief, awesome. We've got Persona, and we got the Phantom Thieves. We got the entire crew assembled. Yeah.
To me, that's all I have to say about that round, really.
Yeah, honestly, that's it. So do we want to jump into the verdict for this arc?
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so my verdict, my bottom line, is that this arc is a whole lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed my reread, and in isolation, it is really good. The problem is, it is not a self-contained mini-story, it is an arc. And as an arc, it has to fit into a larger structure, and that's where it falls apart. And that is a problem that the anime cannot fix, or I don't see how they could fix it, because the anime is going to be very jarring. Because the first episode is going to finish Pro Hero, and it's going to give us the Dabi appearance, and it's going to give us the Todoroki household scene, and then we're just going to move on. Like,
smash cut to gym class. I'm sweating.
Exactly. Exactly. It is almost unfixable. Like, maybe the anime is going to do something fun, but honestly, probably not. Probably just going to do a recap episode, because the first episode always has to be a recap episode. And I just don't think there's any way you can fix this. This is going to remain a problem with this arc that unfortunately isn't limited to weekly release. What is limited to the weekly release is most of the bad stuff. Like, rereading this arc is super enjoyable. The action is really good. Some of the moves these characters pull off are just fantastic. The quirks get a lot of shine, and now with the hindsight, we can say that it prepares you to seeing these characters in action in the war arc. Like the fucking mushroom girl, Kinoko, gets to do something in the war arc. It's small, but it's there.
Honanuki is literally the reason they keep Gigantomachia in place.
Yeah, right? Like, it's cool. This is a good arc for people who care about MHA to a maybe fanatic degree. For anyone else, this arc might be disappointing. So, fun fact, do you remember how I told you last time that my girlfriend was catching up to MHA after the W reveal happened? Yeah. So, she read the joint training arc, obviously. As she caught up, she's caught up now. I taught her how to use the Shonen Jump app. And I asked her about the joint training arc, and she is a very casual fan. Like, she likes Ida and thinks he's funny when he does the robot, right?
Yeah.
And so I asked her of her opinion of the joint training. She was like, "It's cool. I had fun," and that's kind of where it ended. I was like, you know what? You're right. It is cool, and I had fun too. So that's really the verdict. We mentioned this before and we discussed it in the DMs. I think a 7 out of 10 is adequate for this arc. It's, maybe a bit too long. Its placement is really bad, and it will, for anyone who's read it weekly, it will probably forever remain tarnished. But for what it is worth, it's a lot of fun. And when the anime comes around, I'm sure it'll make for a fun, first 6-7 episodes. Before the anxiety begins about, oh my god, what are they going to do with MVA?
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's my verdict. Cool. Would have been cooler if it were anywhere else.
Yeah. All right. And then as for me, I agree with a lot of the things you said. The fun fact, the joint training arc, I believe, is probably, I don't know, it's either the second or third arc I've reread the most, and that's mostly just because just for me personally, sure, I love the character drama, all this stuff, but when I rewatch my favorite series, I always go to and it's just for casual reasons. Man, I love Avatar, but I never, Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I never watch season 2 episodes because it's all plot, and so I'll just be let's just throw up a season 3 episode where they do Footloose, and that's how I feel about, and that's what I always watch, and then I'm cool, I don't have to think about Avatar for a while. I scratch that itch, and that's how I feel about Joint Training Arc. Is that it is a filler episode of a canon story, and it just feels man, I'm feeling some MHA, but I don't want to oh my gosh, I don't want to get depressed about Gentle or Eri suffering, or I don't want to see, I don't want to see All Might lose his powers or all these things. So either I'm going to read the early stuff in MHA, or I'm going to read Joint Training, and I'm just going to chill out, read a few fights, and I got my fix. So I definitely think, like you said, it's just a ton of fun. It's crippled by its placement and a lot of these parts don't cripple it. These are just kind of major annoyances. They're major flaws that keep it from being a fun arc, and it's a 9 out of 10, which is the things like the vestiges and how it's handled in terms of the characters reacting to it. And then just the moment to moment not being like you said, there's no middle goal or immediate goal. It's mostly just long-term goal of maybe One for All will do something. But as it stands, it's a really fun arc. And for me, a 7 out of 10 just means it's good. I would read it, or I would reread it. It's not great. And whereas something like a 6 or a 5 would just be average, where it's oh, it exists. That for me, a 5 is probably the final exams in the manga, the final test, where it's it's there, it has a good moment, but I will just watch that one good moment in the anime and I will never touch it again. And then a 6 would be something that's just a little bit better. Maybe it has a few good scenes. Or maybe it has a good section, but 7 for me is just, it's good. It's a good arc. It's got flaws, but at the end of the day, when I think back on this arc, I think fondly, Horikoshi doesn't beat me at night. He kisses me to bed, and we go on and make the next arc. So that's what we got to do.
Well,
7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Horikoshi gives me food occasionally.
Yeah. All right, dude. This was fun. This was great.
This was a lot of fun. And one final thing I want to mention is that while we bitched a lot about the transition from Pro Hero to Joint Training, I will say Horikoshi's transition game has stepped up so much since then. The transition from MVA to the War Arc is butter smooth. no no flaws almost. Like the only thing I've said in the war arc, I wish there was an additional arc, but just by looking on the transition from like the beginning of MVA up to the end of the war arc, it's just a smooth ride. Like we just go and have fun, and I really like that he seems to have learned from that. I only wish he wouldn't have learned that training arcs are bad, because man, throw me some training arcs. Come on.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. It's always wonderful to have you on the channel, and like I'm sure you've seen the comments on the last video. Like, all the people really seem to enjoy our conversations. So, fellas,
yeah, everyone who watched, you were very pleasant, and I hope to see more comments too. And I'm just very excited to this definitely reignite my spark to continue this series of is MHA good? And we just go through every single arc. So definitely look forward to that, because we're going to start at the beginning of the series, right?
I assume so. I mean, now that we've gotten the black sheep out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Hey, thank you for coming on, and this series wouldn't exist without your initiative, so thank you for that as well.
No problem.
Before you go, what do we do? You're right. So if you want more in-depth MHA discussions, you can head over to the Church of MHA. They do that, I hear. I've never actually tuned into, but you're in there as well most of the time, right, Ian?
Yeah, no, I was there. I've been there for quite a while. I haven't been able to get on as much, but they basically have my enthusiasm, but there's like 6 to 10 of them every week. So
yeah, so if you want the weekly MHA experience and reaction, which of course I don't provide because I don't do weekly reviews. It's just something I don't really feel like doing. If you want that at the level of depth that we've done here, go to the Church of MHA. Ian, you can provide me a link and I can link it in the description. I think that's fair.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. In that case, thanks everyone for watching. This was a breezy 3 hours compared to the last one, which was almost 4 hours. But, Joint Training is kind of a lightweight arc, all things considered.
Yeah, 3 hours is good enough for an arc that there's not much to talk about.
Right.
You guys don't even know the half of it when we get to Overhaul or My Villain. You're going to be doomed.
Oh my god. My Villain, we have to do like a 24-hour stream for that.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, boy.
I actually can't believe that we got to 3 hours. Like, it makes me like, it's hilarious, but it makes me excited, because I was like, maybe the war arc was just a fluke and we just had a lot to talk about. I'm like, oh my gosh, if we got this much out of Joint Training, oh boy.
I'm already going to predict the shortest review we're going to do is probably going to be the battle training mini arc of Deku versus Baku, because that arc kind of has nothing going for it besides the fight, but the fight is so good that no one cares, right?
Yeah, of course.
But we'll get to that. For now, right. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel, and hopefully you'll also check out Ian and his stuff in the church. And see you around next time. Take care and wash your hands.
Take care.